Mr. Buckles, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just ask everybody to remain standing. Just a brief moment of silence for Brennan Cornack, who tragically passed away last week. If we just keep him and his family and his friends in your thoughts, but if we just take a moment of silence. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Superintendent's reports. We'll
Do
start
roll call.
Sorry. I didn't do roll call. Oh, roll call. I missed that. Sorry. Roll call, please.
Mr. Buckles?
Here.
Mr. Lovak?
Here.
Mr. Bruno?
Here.
Mrs. D'Ambrosio?
Here.
Mrs. Nelson? Here. Mr. Curry?
Here.
Mrs. Clark?
Here. All right.
All right.
Now superintendent's
All right.
reports. Do I have that
We'll
right
start
now?
with the construction update. Jack, you want to lead us off? John, you leading us off tonight? Big guy.
I always have to bring John just in case, you know.
I'm sure the older gentleman goes first.
Okay.
Oh.
Just trying to be kind.
At least I don't look as Do you want to just give a summary of where things stand on the overall progress of Hadley? You're living it and breathing it every day.
So we're actually in the, what we would call the separation between the construction of the new addition at Hadley and then the renovation of the inside of Hadley. So as you know, today, music classes moved over into the addition at Hadley. So the kids started to go to school there this morning. Dave and Brian and their staff was able to really do a great job last Thursday and Friday getting the classrooms set up. So staff are in the first floor in the common area and the two music classrooms. And basically those spaces replace the pod spaces. So as a result of that, this morning we started doing a little bit of disconnecting electrical and getting ready to take apart and reconfigure the pods. So that work started, and that work will continue now until the beginning of the 2019-2020 school year when we finish that in August. So that will go on, and we'll start to bring on the contractors who were added as part of the last bid package at Hadley, and the contractors who still have work to do finishing the addition will continue through the beginning of summer here at Hadley to work on that. As Jack came before, and I won't get
There you
back
go.
from
There
him.
you go.
Don't give it up.
The last part of the component of what we're doing for you at this point is the renovation to the other schools. Franklin, Lincoln, Forest Glen, and Churchill with a little bit of paving. So that work has all been let. The board has already approved all those bids, and those contracts have been awarded. And we have a project manager in-house right now going through the process of getting prepared to do that work. And he's working with all those trade contractors to get our submittals, shop drawings, and all the parts and pieces ordered so they'll be there in place. That work won't start until school gets out, but it'll go on from that first week of June through the second or third week of August. And then, last thing, we have one more bid package out to bid, which is the last component of the project, which is the audiovisual components for Hadley School for the music classrooms, and then for the pods, the audiovisual design was just published a few days ago, so we have that out to bid to trade contractors for that work, and I believe that next week when Fred gets back, we're going to have a pre-bid, and then we'll have a bid opening out of so that the execution part of it is moving along.
Nice. Summary of where we're at.
And the financial side, everything is still holding well. We're about 80% built out on the Hadley addition project and last summer's project. And so that project is still holding well with good remaining work to be done there. And the Churchill project that we did last summer, we're just about ready to financially close that project out, all the paperwork, warranties, as-bills, all that stuff. That budget held as well. And then everything else, as John said, is under contract. So We issued a change order summary, so any questions?
Before we get into those deep questions, I would like to thank Dave and his team. The work they've done over these last few weeks is absolutely incredible. The amount of furniture, equipment that were in the pods area, and moving it into the new addition, supporting the teachers with what they needed to ensure that we were ready to have classes today. Dave, incredible, but I know your team, if you would also mention all your teammates from Brian and everybody else.
Yeah, well, Jesse, Javier, Brian, and Edmund, there's probably about 12 or 15 guys over the weekend. So, they did a really fantastic job and went pretty good. So we were done by 7 o'clock on Friday and finished up Saturday morning. So.
And teaching this morning.
And playing music this morning.
Yeah.
And it really was, I appreciate you saying that, because it really was a critical component. It's been intended all along to make that transition into those spaces so that we could have access to the pods, because there's too much work to do in the pods area over one summer. So that help and all Dave's and his team's assistance was critical.
And I also say your guy Ryan, the day-to-day operation over there, and the collaboration between Dave and Ryan has been fantastic. So appreciate your team. So, board, any questions for Jack or John or Dave?
When you say the budget held, that means it's under budget?
Yep, everything is still under budget. Plenty of contingency left, so
Yeah, that I saw, so.
everything's holding good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen,
All right.
thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great night.
Thank you,
All
John.
right, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Well done.
Better for you. All right. Are there any reports from board members?
Just a quick one, and I posted this so everybody will see it, but I just want to make an announcement, and I had mentioned this before, but now we have the final job description. So the chairperson for PEP, the Partnership for Educational Progress, is retiring. She's been involved for about 23 years total, but since 1995, and has been the chairperson. This is an unpaid position. It is volunteer. And so she kind of updated, and we approved the position description, and will be reaching out to folks to seek a new chairperson. Again, still unpaid, but there's plenty of people out there, so we're hoping to find someone who's willing to come in and continue the work of PEP.
Fantastic. Other board members?
Just one quick point about the a report posted having to do with land and education bills in Springfield. One to be really attentive to, that seems to have some legs and some momentum, is a bill that would compel school districts to go to referendum votes to consider consolidating their districts. And so smaller school districts with slightly bigger school districts, or smaller school district with very large school districts, or 2 large school districts, through a process that, if this bill were to be approved, would lead to a commission that would do a study. And then if a majority of the people on that commission felt it was in the best interest of the state, it's a very, very long bill, but if it met a certain number of pieces of criteria, the people in that community would be compelled to vote on whether or not they wanted to essentially dissolve their district and merge it into accompanying a friendly district. So this is a piece of legislation that superintendents and boards in DuPage have come out very strongly against. And I've spent some time talking to area representatives about the bill, but it is moving. And it does have legs. There may be an amendment. So it's just something that the community, I think, should be attentive to. There are many issues, but I thought this was one that warranted some underscoring. So thanks.
I was-
Go ahead, Lynn.
No, go ahead.
There's one more bill that's pending that I think is of interest, and it's House Bill 355, which would require, I believe it's 15 or 20 of a new teacher's certification hours to be in inclusive practices. And just a week and a half ago, that bill passed the House and has been moved to the Senate floor. So that's something to keep our eye on as well.
Yeah, a lot of legislation.
I was just kind of wondering, you said people were against um, the bill for the consolidation of school
Mhm.
districts, and I was wondering what were some of the main issues that were against?
Yeah, well,
What the concerns
yeah.
were?
Based on attempts in the past and studies that have been done, it's rare that there's any significant financial savings in doing that. Secondly, there's lots of evidence that smaller school districts actually have higher performing students. The bill is not a savings. In many cases, it would generate increased costs depending on how the mergers or the consolidations occurred. But one thing, Linda, that's really troubling is that normally you would expect the community to determine whether or not they wanted to vote on anything that's happening within their schools, that there would be that local control. Well, this would be people appointed out of Springfield, and if it's just a bare majority liked, on the basis of their analysis, they liked the idea of a consolidation, the district would be ordered, directed, compelled to put it on the ballot. Now, it may not pass, but it just strikes people who believe in local control as just kind of an outrageous usurpation of local power. So that, along with the substantive issues around the bill, and it is a really long, convoluted bill with something like 26 criteria. I actually care to read any of the research on why this is some academics have done some work on this going back a few years. I'm happy to share it with you. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
At coffee on Sunday.
Okay, I'll do it. Give me a chance to read this stuff to you. Thank you.
Bob.
Thank you.
Any other?
Linda, not
Any
Oh,
other,
with Linda. Okay. Oh, jeez.
any other board reports from board members? All right. Public participation. Okay. Members of the public who wish to address the board should complete the yellow public participation form and hand it to Ms. Schillinger, the board recording secretary. She will call your name when it is your turn to speak. I would like to remind members of the audience that speakers should identify themselves and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. In order to maintain the consistency of public participation, I will inform the speaker when there is 30 seconds remaining and stop the speaker at exactly 3 minutes. Any information left unfinished can be handed or emailed to Ms. Schillinger or emailed directly to the board. All questions raised will be forwarded to the appropriate D41 staff representative for a response if a response is warranted, and if the member of the public provides the appropriate contact information.
Jeff Cooper?
Jeff Cooper, Glen Ellyn. Kurt and Stephanie, I want to thank you for your service. Most of the community appreciates your effort and wisdom in heading the most responsive and fiscally responsible board in all the years that I've been coming here. I personally admire the focus it took to see through the process of finding a new superintendent. Also, in leading the board to the last 2 levies, District 41, like all other school districts, is entitled to what it needs. It is not entitled to every last dollar, as I believe the new 3 board members believe, along with at least one here. Dr. Gordon, as June 30th is quickly approaching, I'm pleased to find that you have found future employment. I'm also pleased that Wenatchee is not around the corner. I hope that you'll learn from your mistakes.
Incredibly disrespectful.
Well, you've had a history of that here too, okay? Going back to the closed session where we heard what you said about us about 5 years ago. That's still back here. Anyways, I hope you'll learn from your mistakes. 3 pieces of advice. Don't withhold information from legitimate FOIAs. That's 1. 2, when you lose a lawsuit, be contrite. 3, people will figure out when you conspire with a group to steal a referendum. Next time, let it pass or fail without your 10 fingers in it. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else?
Excuse me. Then let's make it very clear here. I'm not commenting on a person's right to say anything they want to say. You're free to say it, stand behind it, be defined by it. But as a member of the board, I hope that as we go forward, people will be respectful, decent, kind, and honest in addressing
Bob,
members
we're
of
not
the board
supposed to
and
comment after public
administrators.
comment.
I understand that. I think on this
I know,
occasion,
but there's been
I
plenty
feel
of times I
compelled
would
to do
like
it.
to say things after public
I'm not
comment. I mean,
criticizing, I'm not saying that.
we need to
Yeah.
just follow our
Hey,
norms.
Bob.
We need to
I
just
got a
follow
real
our
problem with
norms.
that, in the sense that after I took a vote, I got yelled, "Shame on you," by an employee of the district.
All right, let's
You know,
move on. I'm just saying,
just
Bob,
saying.
Bob.
Wait, Bob
Bob.
was okay to speak,
Bob-
and
Bob's okay to
when
speak,
Bruce
but I
speaks,
can't-
No.
I
then
can't
you're
get
telling people to
frustrated
move
that-
on. This is,
Something.
Okay.
we've sat here and taken all sorts of
Listen,
unkindness
listen.
that occurred at
If
public
anybody
comment,
would
which they
like
have a
to
right to
comment
say.
about it, we can do it at the end of the other, but Bob, our norm is you can, if you have a clarifying question or to answer a question, that's when we comment after public comment. If you would like to address something, then we save it till the end of the meeting, till other, because we're not here to debate with the public. We're here to listen to them. So we need to respect that, whether we like what they say or not. We need to follow that norm
Exactly.
out of respect.
Understood.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, no one else? Okay, presentations. Budget development calendar.
So Eric will update the board on where you will be at with the calendar.
Right, so this is just kind of a formality. This is the first step really in the official preparation of the budget. You know, we work on the different pieces of it throughout the year, but this is the first step in the actual completion of the budget, and it is to set an expectation to the board on a time frame on when things will be coming before you and when some of the key steps are going to be completed. So very straightforward in nature. It's only one page. It's summary style. As you guys know, we've done a lot of the work on the budget already. At this point in the process, it's really just kind of fine-tuning and compiling all the information into the document that you will eventually see as the tentative budget. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
I do have one thing. I have a request for the budget when it is presented, because I was trying to when we were talking about the staffing plan, just kind of like trying to connect it to our budget from last year and how it looked, and it was difficult to follow. Just for one, I understand like with staffing plan, the way we have it laid out, it makes sense for that discussion. And then when we do the budget, it's laid out a little bit differently in terms of, I'm thinking more like the staff detail plan that was in for each school, and it had the administration, which is usually 2 for the elementary schools, and then you have the GIA, then you have the ASME, then you have the exempt. But then when you try to connect that to the staffing plan, and I think there's some categories that have both, that had the mixture of like an exempt and a GIA. So it was just kind of hard to follow, and I tried to just kind of total them up by school, and they didn't even kind of total up. So I wasn't sure, like maybe sometime between like last year, March 2000, this would have been March 2018 when we were talking about it with the fiscal year, this year, 19, like maybe something moved between March to the budget year. But it would be helpful if there's like the kind of,
Yeah, and we talked about that. So I think what we're going to, and I might be speaking for Marcy, so tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong, but we talked about this. So the format I brought to the board last year, what you're going to see is you're going to see the change from last year to this year, and that's done by person. So I think what we've talked about doing is taking my budget format and producing a subset that we can use for staffing next year. So because I agree with you, the long-standing format that we've used for that staffing report, it's kind of outdated now. I think what we've done in the budget format is very specific. It ties exactly to the individuals referenced on the FTE count. So we're going to take that, create a subset that we'll use next spring.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
yeah, thank
Perfect.
you. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
appreciate
it's going to be cleaner too from the budget side, because then I'm positive that I have all the right people and
Right. Great, thank you.
One thing I was kind of sort of a budget question relating to that staffing, I was trying to figure out, I know when we talk about having the contingency in the budget, where does that show up in the budget report? And you can answer that later for me if you want, but I was trying to figure out where you find that, because it's not, the staffing seems to be by individual building, but then when you.
I don't have contingency positions that I leave, like, and there's been a discussion about that, and really the way I've addressed contingencies is I don't take out a salary when somebody leaves.
Okay,
So that's kind of how we do it, but it's something to consider this time through. You know, if we want the historical or traditional definition of a contingency position, you're gonna need a person that says contingency. You know, we don't have that. I didn't build that last year because I just don't think it's necessary. I think there's enough natural savings and transition between employees leaving the district and new employees coming in, and savings and salaries that you usually absorb that cost. But I'm happy to add that placeholder. I don't have any issue with that at all.
So if to pick up on that, if you came to a point where you needed that extra FTE, you know, at a 1.0 or whatever, 1.25, and you didn't have that natural savings, you know, there weren't those dollars, then that would have to go back to figure out how to staff for that.
Correct.
Yeah.
well, I think like from this year's staffing to
And
next
the board will
year,
approve it, right?
it's kind of important to know, because I think we had, like from last year's staffing, we had about 3 FTE that we dropped because of reduction of number of sections and things like that. So we're kind of adding those back in this year. So it's showing that we're not adding, right, Marcy, am I making sense? We're not adding 3 new positions, we're basically using that head count that we just didn't use for a year. So just, you don't want to lose sight of trying to capture that
Yeah,
and
no,
use
you're
that
right.
information in history.
I think the nice piece, what Eric and Marcy will do within the board, or within the budget itself, will be at the end, the grand total of all the FTE, but under certified, classified administration, so you always see where were we at the prior year compared to this year. So you will see that piece, because of that aspect of just trying to be consistent from year to year will allow that to occur.
Okay.
We're looking for.
One thing for sure, way better than 4 or 5 years ago. The budget transparency. So
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
when we first got on the board, you couldn't figure anything out. So
Marcy, you're up next with the mentor program. Want to talk to us a little bit about kind of the background and then get into a few of the details?
Yep. Okay. So this year is our first year of our mentoring program. We trained 13 mentors that are working with 15 new teachers this year. And new teachers meaning new to District 41, not new to the teaching profession necessarily. They were trained last summer for 2 days. The mentoring position is a supplemental pay position that was approved last year. The mentor and the new teacher meet monthly and have ongoing discussions. The suggestion was communicating with an interactive journal, which they have been going back and forth. Some people have found that the interactive journal is not beneficial. They're just doing face-to-face meetings because it's just easier. It's kind of up to them, but there just needs to be communication happening so we know the new teacher knows, what's coming, and the mentor knows what's going on with the new teachers. The mentor also visits the new teachers 2 times in the year, not as an observation, but more as a, what's going on, what can I help you with? And they especially did this before the new teachers had their formal observations with their administrators to kind of give them a run through of what to expect. So we did a survey right in the middle of the year, and we will do it again at the end of the year, so we're keeping data as to how the program is going. So with the mentor data, there were 19 statements that the mentors had to rate. So mentors agree that the program is beneficial. 68% strongly agree, 31% agree. The mentors believe that it has increased their knowledge of supporting or coaching a new teacher. For many of them, this was something new because they are not coaches in our district. They are other teachers and have had to learn how to be a coach. So that's been an ongoing process, and that was really helpful with our training that we had during the summer. So to a great extent, 63%, moderate extent, 30%. So we're going to continue to work on that, and I would say this is probably the biggest area where I have had the most questions and have provided the most support to mentors as well. Then we did a survey of the new teachers. There were 44 statements that the new teachers rated to demonstrate how they felt the support was for them coming into District 41. So they have agreed that mentoring has provided support for their instruction and their management of their classroom. 48% strongly agree and 48% agree. And then it has increased their knowledge of teaching practice with the mentoring support. 29% to a great extent and 56% to a moderate extent. And the topics that are addressed in the mentoring meetings with their monthly mentor meetings that they have has been, their concerns have been addressed. I think that's something that probably for next year we will look at tweaking a little bit, because we've had some really good feedback on where some topics might be better addressed in other months than when we address them this year in that month, but it's something that we can continue to work on. And then the average level of support needed by the mentor. This is their report as to how they felt that they needed support. So that was interesting. Some people said they didn't need any support, but most said minimal or moderate. Really only a few teachers have felt that they've needed extensive support coming in to our district. So that's good news. I think part of that is because many of our teachers that were hired were not brand new teachers. They were teachers that have worked in other places. Then we also provided feedback, so themes from their mentors. They feel that things are going well, that they want to continue problem solving and supporting. They had a lot of praise for their new teachers, and again, repeating that they're not new to teaching, but new to our district, and so being able to just help give them that little push to get comfortable with District 41 has been helpful. I think one thing that we do need to work on is this last bullet point, pairing mentors with a mentee who's on the same team or type of position. I mean, that would be the ideal. However, it is a position that people have to apply for. So when people apply for it, we can try to match them up as close as we can, but it was not perfect this year, and I think that's where we've found some issues. So we have to figure out a way how to improve there. Feedback from the new teachers. Again, they're feeling lucky to be a part of the district and have the support. Feeling supported in District 41 than any other district. Again, having those conversations around their curriculum, but feeling like they even want more. I would say some of the new teachers even want more feedback and more support than they've received so far, so we'll continue to work on that with them. And that's pretty much an overview of where we are. This will continue for a second year. These new teachers that were with us this year can go into year 2, and our new teachers for this year that are year 1 will start like they did. So our year 2 program will be a little less intense than the year 1, but still there to provide support for the new teachers that feel that it's necessary. If they've been in teaching before, they might not feel that it's necessary for year 2. Any questions?
Did you have any mentors drop off because of time or anything like that? Everybody stayed?
Everybody has stayed.
Yeah, that's great. And so just two curiosity questions. One is the district topics. When you say district, it sounds like these are like big rock topics, like big picture topics, and so the focus was on getting them to understand.
Like when parent-teacher conferences came around.
Got it.
That was the topic for that month.
Okay.
When assessment, really started in with map testing and that kind of stuff, that was one of the topics. So we kind of just provided the mentors a list of things that happened, and then they took that and used that for their monthly meetings. But that's where I think maybe we can get a little better and even narrow it down a little bit more to give
Sounds like
some
it was
more
a timing
support.
issue, kind of, yeah.
It just depends, right?
And then, just lastly, was there any anecdotal conversation about the classroom management piece where they came in to give them some feedback, help to prep them? Was there any, I'm just curious if there was a conversation about new to District 41 teachers with our students and whether they felt like it helped them, connect more quickly to classroom management support.
I haven't had that feedback, but that was one of the interesting things is that in other districts where I've run mentoring programs, usually that is the area where teachers need the most support. So that was the one thing this year that I thought was interesting is that I did not get that feedback from mentors, that they have had to provide a lot of support to the new teachers for their classroom management. Mostly it's been learning the curriculum, learning the ins and outs of District 41. So that's a good thing that I believe that the teachers that were hired this year were really good at the management and didn't have as many, maybe as much of a struggle with trying to get that under control before they could get into the rest of the parts of teaching.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. Marcy, the first-year teachers becoming second-year teachers stay in the mentor program?
So if they're a true first-year teacher to teaching, yes. If they are a teacher that has been a teacher before and they are a second, it'll be an option for them.
Okay, it's their second year in this district, but they've taught before. And to underscore the well-trained part, so additional ways of helping mentors be better at their work. Is there something planned over the summer? Is it mostly?
Yeah, so there is a 4-part series for training mentors, and we only did one of the parts. So we will continue to work on that throughout as new people come on and as people continue to be mentors to go through that.
Okay. Thank you.
Just want to say, I like that you adjusted and didn't make them right. You got your first year teacher, you got enough stuff to swallow. I mean, it's like drinking from a water hose. So if they were meeting, I'm happy with that and not having to reflect, on every little thing that they're doing in their first year when they're really busy.
They are very busy, so yeah.
I was just going to ask, did you have more mentors apply than you needed?
That was at the beginning of the year. I can't remember. Maybe 1 or 2, but I believe we took almost everybody that had applied. And some people might have applied that didn't meet the qualifications because they had to have taught for so many years and their evaluations had to be certain. So that might have been one of the disqualifications. But I can look that up again and tell you for sure where we were. But for the most part, from what I remember, is that pretty much the people that applied became mentors.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was more just curious. And then, from the feedback from the mentees, I guess is that what you call them? The one that said there wasn't any impact, like, is that, I think it was like really 1 if you look at the percentage. So will you look into that as far as why? Maybe is there an issue with the mentor? Is that type of
Yeah,
things
so
you're
I
looking
did kind
into?
of look into that, and it's somebody who has quite a bit of experience as a teacher and in a specialized area, I would say. So they probably didn't really need the support, but we provided it to them anyway. So if they did need to know something about District 41, there was somebody there that they could go to.
Okay.
So yeah, that might not have been the best matchup as a mentoring matchup, but I still feel it's necessary that we give that person that option for the support if they want it.
Right. Okay. All right, anything else?
Marcy, nice job
Let it
leading
went
this.
well, yeah.
Good
Thank you,
work.
Marcy.
Making a big difference there. Next up, we have the discussion items on the technology recommendation. So Mike, on the student Chromebooks,
Correct. This recommendation would refresh our fleet of Chromebooks for students, grades kindergarten through 6th grade. The lease on the
elementary Chromebooks is coming to an end this summer. There's about 2,100 of those Chromebooks. Those were on a fair market value lease, so the intention is to send those back to the leasing company this summer. And we've got about 400 of the, or 430 sixth grade Chromebooks that would be for the incoming sixth graders at Hadley, that would also need to be refreshed. So we added a few more Chromebooks to this particular recommendation than we did prior, because we plan to also incorporate or provide Chromebooks to all the instructional aides that come in to the schools, as well as adding to the fleet of Chromebooks that are available in the libraries, and also adding one extra Chromebook to each classroom, particularly at the elementaries, and also at Hadley. So the teachers have either a spare or they'll have a Chromebook that they can use themselves during instruction or for instruction. So there'd be a few more than we had done in the past. A couple changes to this recommendation as opposed to in the past. For the elementaries, those Chromebooks we would extend to a 4-year lease, and we would change that to a $1 buyout lease. So at the end of the term, we can elect to keep those Chromebooks, or at least keep the ones that we could still use, that would still be useful. And at the Academy, those Chromebooks, those will be purchased outright. And as we talked about earlier, budget discussions, as well as to complete at the end of 8th grade, they will be Chromebooks for the elementaries we would lease, again on a 4-year $1 buyout, and the ones, the 430 for the junior high, we would purchase outright. This is the discussion tonight.
Board members?
Question?
How much had we budgeted for this? I can't quite remember the numbers that we talked about back then.
Right about where we had budgeted for those. I think when I originally brought the budget, I may have planned for a few extra Chromebooks, but I have to go back and check to see what exactly I had back when we talked about the budget.
Okay, because I remember we were thinking about leasing, thinking about buying it. I don't know how much it was per year that we had planned. I'd love to get that
I think originally,
information.
yeah, we may have talked about 3 years because that's what we had traditionally done in the past. And we'd also done fair market value leases, so the lease terms may have been a little less expensive as opposed to the $1 buyout. But then we don't incur some of the damage costs that we run into when we do return them back to the leasing company. But I can get that information for you.
Right. I might have remembered the way it was budgeted for the junior high Chromebooks was that it was split into 3 years because it was going to be intended to be kept for 3 years. Is that right? Anyway, it'd be okay. And then I see Bruce. I can see why. Then it's kind of confusing when you look at it. Then there's like the part that's leased, and that's the elementary portion.
Correct.
So I wasn't sure what to look for
It's
that.
a dramatic
either
increase in the number of Chromebooks we'll be looking at for the grade schools as opposed to half.
Right.
I mean, from what I can tell, we'd be spending like $320,000 a year. I just want to know kind of what we had budgeted, and the $146 a year, which are going to the middle school, would disappear for 3 years.
That would be an ongoing cost from year to year.
So it's $430 per class. So
correct.
6th grade would be $430.
Class, right.
Then those kids, okay. So that would be, it'd be $320 per year for the foreseeable future.
Well, it'll be
because of the lease.
Is the lease, right?
Okay. For the next 4 years.
Correct.
And then we'd look at it.
But then at the end of the 4 years, we have the option to keep some of that fleet. That would ease some of the cost for the refresh going forward. So we could still probably get another year.
Do you remember
what those Chromebooks?
What the cost would have been if we just bought the Dells outright for the 2,300 Dells outright?
Let me take a quick look.
It's just
$707,500.
Okay, so that's all right.
That includes also the Chrome licensing that goes along with that.
So that's the straight up cost if we were to buy it today.
If we were to purchase them outright.
Okay.
And we're not required to keep a certain number of the Chromebooks. You can choose to keep some in order to support the refresh or whatever it might be moving forward. Yeah.
4 years is a steady value past practice has always been 3 years, and then we kind of got rid of them for a number of reasons, but I think we could get an extra year out of those and help ease the cost from year to year.
Right.
And in the past, have we had you mentioned a couple of extra, just having extra Chromebooks at each classrooms, additional at LMC and things like that. Is that our past practices, or have you found that we needed to kind of beef up
It
our
is not.
extras because
Yeah, it has not been
various
past practice to
reasons?
keep an extra one in the classroom. Occasionally, Chromebooks,
Right.
they break or something happens, and it's a quick way for a teacher to get a hold of one rather than coming to us. It's time to us to get another Chromebook up and running.
And then at the LMCs, I forgot, I'm sorry.
At the LMCs, right now, they have about maybe 10 Chromebooks in there in
So
reserve.
just like a replace?
And that's part of what we would also pull from for loaners, for spares. And we intend to at least increase that to 20 in the library, so they have a few more as well.
And just kind of remind me, because I feel like, I understand that these are all different devices at different times. Like we had approved the teacher's laptop. And I remember there were iPads that were also, I couldn't find when that was, but wasn't there like iPads that were also purchased?
What I do is I budget in my capital suite of accounts for some iPads to be replaced, but those would be purchased outright. We wouldn't lease those, and it wouldn't be a large quantity. Those are just to kind of replace some of the iPads that we have, either in the libraries, we're using some in kindergarten now, as well as any for special ed that we might need.
Right, that's what I kind of, right, we had approved that, right? Because I kind of remember having that discussion about the iPads. Okay.
Yeah, there was on the earlier conversation where we brought the overall recommendation.
In the budget document.
Yep, in the budget.
It was in the budget,
That's where it
okay.
was at, was
In
that-
the 5-year,
Well,
was it during the 5-year technology?
Mercy, seems like it happened.
It was
in
October during the
So we
5-year
brought all
technology.
that information on
Okay.
Mike's tech plan.
Yeah, that was part of the full budget.
Feels like we've been talking
I know,
about
that's
it
what I mean. It seems like
constantly.
years
So
ago, but
I'm
we
trying
probably
to
have to
just kind of keep them all straight. Okay.
Yeah, and all of these things are kind of coming at
Sorry.
the same time.
No.
So
Right.
part of that, thinking of a 4-year lease for the elementaries and we purchase the teachers' laptops outright, we might be able to better stagger that moving forward. So the cost as well as the workload goes along with prepping all those out and getting them straight.
Because we do all that in-house,
Yes, we do.
so that saves money too, which is good.
So we think, oh, sorry, did someone else have a question? No, so for the, I really should know this, but I don't. So in first grade, are we 1-to-1 now for Chromebooks? We weren't always though, were we?
We weren't always.
Okay, that's where I was like, I remember that. I'm like, I didn't know we were already, okay. But, and then I guess to kind of expand upon Linda's question, but putting a Chromebook in each classroom, we think like now that the teachers have laptops, but we feel that like if someone breaks or there's enough instances where they need one quickly, it makes sense to keep a spare one in their room.
Right, or even if they're mobile in the classroom and they're moving around working with the students, it's a smaller, more lightweight device for them to use. And also, get them more accustomed to using Chromebooks as well. When we had piloted Chromebooks, and it's got to be about 4 or 5 years ago at Franklin, we distributed the ones that we had piloted to the teachers, and there was a great demand that teachers liked having it. They liked having that additional device. They liked the flexibility of using that in the classroom or even taking that home to do work in the evening. So we thought we'd expand that to include the extra Chromebook in each classroom, so not only would they have that flexibility, they'd also have a hot spare in the room in case one of the student laptops did go down.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Mike.
See you next meeting.
All right.
And then the board
Policy.
policy. So it's one policy. Is the board oath that would be administered with the next board. And this was revised during the last legislative session and was implemented and effective January 1st, 2019. So we just took it right from
It was,
Oh, sorry,
go
go ahead,
ahead.
Erica. You can go ahead.
I was gonna say, it was just, the last action on this bill, it was a House bill, actually, 4768, and it was bipartisan in the House and the Senate. So, they took action on it in committee in August, on August 24th of 2018, and then it came forward in press, and then became effective January 1st. So they allowed for districts to kind of put it into their policy, and so that's where we have it now. And it literally is, if you look at the bill, it literally is just a lift into what's in the board report too, for board members.
And it changed our oath, and the board member oath, correct? Just to make sure.
Correct.
And then,
Yeah.
so I know when we talked about this in policy, I had brought up our code of conduct, which is separate, so from the, which is separate from the oath. I wish I'm like, this is where I'm getting.
that meeting, but
We both presented here
Yeah.
and, with
I'm trying to remember which came first.
the oath comes first, your policy, and then the code is the exhibit, which is also
Right.
included in the.
Right. Because that was the one I had asked about. The oath came first, and then I had asked about the code, because I think they were actually, oh my gosh, Erica, this was so long ago, but I think they weren't even in alignment as it was, so we were saying we should just kind of go back through and clean it up.
Yeah. And just for the public, what we're talking about, I realize we're not really defining this, is that there were six kind of statements that were revised in this bill that more specifically, I guess you would call it, describe some of the board responsibilities in terms of assessment of student achievement, participation with the community, formulating goals, establishing a structure and environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential. So when you read it, I think, versus the former oath and then now in the code of conduct, it's more concrete, is the way I would describe it.
anything else, Stephanie?
In there.
All right, board members, any comments on this? And this will come back for our, the final approval in 2 weeks. Okay. Thank you.
All right, board discussion. Up first, Erica, I'll turn this over to you. The
Yeah.
letter that you had brought to the board.
Yeah, so I had resent at board members' request that ISB one pager that we had been sent to us on the budget. And just as a reminder, this was I'll just read the email that I sent to the board so it's understandable. A new state superintendent for Illinois State Board was sworn in the week of last week in February, Dr. Carmen Ayala, and we had received from ISB information about their budget recommendation, which went to the governor in February. And so what I had asked the board in the draft letter that I sent was to recognize as a board and be able to send a letter supporting full funding of the budget recommendation. And in my email to all of you, I also said the reality of the state budget remains poor, as we all know, so I get that. But I still think as a board, as a governance body, standing together demonstrates our responsibility to advocate for full funding. And now and in the future, even more so now. I think it also speaks to some of what has been a common conversation for the board, and that is just that kind of balance of taxpayer interest and needs and interests of continuing to grow, the district as well. So it is, I'm going to use this term, but I don't mean it in a pejorative way. I mean, it is symbolic in that we recognize that the state of Illinois is not going to be able to fully fund every single piece of this, but I do think it's a statement that says the areas that they have laid out are important, including the evidence-based funding, which is what we budget on, right? So, so that's that. And I know that we said we would come back and come to some consensus, and then it can be, if agreed upon, can be sent in with the current board. So.
And Erica, that's the ask, Yeah, we have consensus,
Yeah.
and we bring this forward as a D41 board.
Right.
That would be sent to.
Right, to Dr. Ayala, because at the bottom of the draft, if you guys have that copy, I had listed, just in alphabetical order, all of our names, and then leadership titles next to president, vice president, and secretary.
Okay. So looking for consensus on.
Just a small, maybe, slight difference of opinion about the significance. Erica, you mentioned that it was symbolic, but yet important.
Yeah.
I think actually school districts, school boards, communicating to legislators, communicating to ISB are actually taken seriously. They do account for that communications, and school funding in this state will always be contested, right? You're going to compete for available dollars. There is momentum to spend more money in the schools now, and so I think ISB has a little wind behind their back. So I don't think it's merely symbolic. I think if they were to receive letters like this, they will communicate that to the deputy governor for education. They'll communicate that to the chairs of committees. I don't think it's merely just a symbolic.
Yeah, as I said,
statement.
I appreciate that, Bob. I don't, it's not to diminish it. It's to recognize that the state is continues to be in a tough spot. But that shouldn't disallow ISB or any other DCFS or any other departments, right, to want to put their needs and interests at, to the table, which is essentially what this is. So.
Bob, I'm gonna mark you down in the.
Oh yes, you can look me down and see. Thank you, Paul.
Moving along here.
Yeah.
Well done.
Others?
Yeah. Any other questions or changes to the actual letter? Because I'm certainly open to making any of those too.
Well, I was personally, I'm struggling with the letter because, the information that you sent us, I think it was on March 20th, it talks about, it's not this, your letter that you wrote, but the highlights of their budget and their budget recommendation. But it's talking about, basically, there's really no parameters put in here, and it's talking about the state funding preschool for all. And I think that's the part that concerns me a little bit because, I don't think that's realistic. Like you talk about the budget, but I don't think that's realistic. And I don't know, personally, I look at Glen Ellyn, I don't know that I agree that the state should provide preschool for all in our community. I know we used to have, was it a grant? I don't know if it was a grant that provided for preschool for our at-risk students. I don't know if that was a grant or.
We still have it now.
We still have it.
That
Well,
is
we
what the
used to
grant
have
is.
it, and then it went away,
Yeah.
and now we have it again. So there was a gap in time where we didn't have it, and we as a community and the administration, the school board, decided to maintain that and put the money put money towards that. And that was a decision for us as a community, and I think a majority of our community, the large part of our community, can afford preschool and can afford those opportunities for their children. So I think to shift that and to say that the state is going to provide preschool for all, I'm not sure how that would, if you look at how that would impact our community as a school district, we don't have the space to provide that sort of opportunity. And I think we as a community, we don't necessarily, we were okay providing that before they were giving us money for it. I think now that they are, it's nice that we're now getting more money for that, but I'm a little concerned about telling the state that we should support a budget that provides for preschool for all and what exactly that means. So that's why I'm not comfortable with it.
I don't know if you had gotten this part, but this was the news blog from, it's the IASB. So to speak to that, I think there was some confusion. I think the universal access to high quality preschool, which is that $2.4 billion early childhood block grant. So it isn't like legislation that says everybody has to provide preschool for everybody. It's really a block grant that says recognizing that children statewide are not all served in early childhood programs, that this would provide dollars for grants, especially for school districts that don't have the money. And the other thing it funds, and I know this is something that certainly our district has used, and now it's a part of CASE, is the Birth to Three Prevention Initiative Program. So I think what ISB was saying in this is a block grant for universal access to high-quality preschool, especially for those 300,000+ children that are not served by an early childhood program. It would provide dollars to do that. Whereas districts like ours make the commitment, there are districts that don't actually have the dollars, but this block grant could be accessed. So it isn't, does that make sense? It isn't required. I can understand how that can be maybe interpreted or misinterpreted, but it really is about the grant providing money for those districts that don't have the dollars available, that they, could use it. But also the Prevention Initiative Program, which is a huge support for our early childhood kids coming in to make sure that they're, kind of education ready or whatever you would call it. Yeah.
Katie, I'm sorry, I just wondered whether your familiarity with Preschool for All
I'm not sure.
block grant would be helpful to talk about.
So we have the Preschool for All grant currently, that we use for our at-risk preschool program. So yeah, we've definitely seen a benefit to that, and we're, growing our program through the use of those funds, as well as through accessing the ISBE, I don't know, what would you call it, consultant, to help our program grow and expand instructionally for Preschool for All.
Okay. And
That's just the title
But
of
so aren't there
the grant.
grants now? That's, I guess, why I'm not understanding. If we have access to those, we're saying that the rest of the state doesn't have access to.
There is, the statistic that they give is that the reason that the grant was plugged in order to identify the dollars associated with it was in part to continue the Prevention Initiative Program, which is the Birth to Three, which is what we typically call it. So that was to fully fund that. But then also, and I'll just read this from their statement, Illinois State Board of Education said 315,409 children ages 3 to 5 statewide are not served by an early childhood education program funded by the state in FY 2019, a concern because research shows early childhood education significantly impacts student social and economic outcomes. So the agency recommendation provides for all students to have access to pre-kindergarten programs with this budget request. So it's really, to the point earlier, it isn't requiring pre-K, it's saying we have a block of over 300 children in districts that don't have access to this, and so the grant is being asked to fund that so that people do have access to it, so that the grants can be funded.
Kurt, I think you were going to speak next.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with adding anything to a state that has billions of dollars in debt. I'd be okay with a letter that said, make your necessary cuts, make your necessary offsets, get your budget balanced, clear your debt, and then from there we'll begin to prioritize. So anything to me that that adds on to that, I'm just uncomfortable with that. So we live in a state that has $0 at any disposal for anything, and until we force the state to start to pay its bills, to start to make the necessary things that they need to do, face the challenges they need to face, and get the budget in balance, asking them to do anything, add anything to it, to me, they could get 100 letters from 100 different places saying, let's add, we want this and we want this, and I talk about it often about special interest groups, all you do is end up adding dollars to a budget that's already far, too far in debt. So,
Linda?
Well, man, I did have a little bit more issue with the last two paragraphs, like the second to last paragraph, but I was okay sending it, but I was actually, I guess, uncomfortable in that I couldn't help but also just kind of like what Kurt said, just like, well, then where that come from? Then, I feel like I would want to know how they would just kind of balance of kind of what's going on downstate and what we really want to do. So, I mean, I guess, you know, I guess that's just like something that's hard for me to just kind of turn off. In theory, I, you know, get it and love the idea and want to, you know, of course, support it, but then I can't. The practical side, I guess, it's like, well, then how do you fund it? So, I guess I'm kind of that's kind of where I am feeling not that
Bruce?
you know comfortable sending that.
Yeah, I think we're a self-funded district. And we get 93% of our money from local folks. So, and for reasons Kurt and Stephanie explained, I'm for it.
Jake?
I would be okay with bringing it back and violating the new board going down to 8 and being not fully prepared to that. I don't know what the background from the prior years are as to the numbers. I agree with the 4 categories, but as to the numbers, I'm not well enough versed to educate to talk about the numbers. So the categories, I like the categorization. So I'd be okay bringing it back.
So as I look at it, it does not have consensus to move forward as a board.
Well, I guess I'll just close out my comments, and I appreciate everybody taking a look at it, asking me to bring it back. I guess I would say just in closing that the idea behind this is less about our kind of individual status and more about as a board and for public education that the impetus behind this for me was to be able to look at all public schools, of which you're a teacher in one, right, Bruce, and say to the Illinois State Board of Ed, keep promoting full funding, keep encouraging these grants, keep this on the forefront, because, I mean, to the point of much of the comment here, if it's not in front, there are a lot of other needs and interests that can get, you know, taken in front of it. So I think it, you know, it behooves a board to think about that larger, the larger picture, kind of what we're all trying to do as a group of supporters of public ed. So, but thank you. I guess as a public citizen, I will make a comment on May 1st. So, thank you.
I think just to add one thing, just like one other closing thought to that too, I think this demonstrates how, you know, we struggle to look at our community and also look at the state as a whole and school districts as a whole. I think we've had, you know, other issues where you can draw criticism because, well, our district wouldn't do this or our district would do that, and this is an instance where I think if you said, well, the state had to fully fund something like this, you could draw criticism from our community members saying, you know, our state is in so much debt, why are we adding that onto it? So I think there's different ways of looking at things, and I think that's the challenge as board member is looking at our district versus looking at other districts as a whole and trying to balance that. So,
well,
Okay.
thank you for the conversation.
thanks. Okay. All right, on to me. The next subject I had asked to be put on the agenda for the next board discussion item. Yeah, Bob?
Excuse me. If it's, I guess, a point of order, I'd like to put a motion out there that this item be moved out of the discussion part of the agenda because it's brought before us inappropriately outside of the normal course of bringing discussion items. Could be brought up under future items, for example, but I'd like to, my motion is that we revise the agenda and move it out of the discussion part of this agenda because it's not properly before us.
Well, I mean, we do ask that board members bring items to the board table for future agenda items, but, you know, Paul and I can set the agenda and we determine what things go in here, and that I was going to explain why I had put it on the agenda for tonight.
Well, if it's in order.
So I think, I mean, you don't have to bring an item as a future agenda item to get it on the agenda. I mean, that's one way we go about it, but
So, can I ask a clarifying question? So did this come out of a president's meeting then also?
Came out of a discussion with Paul and
Just
I.
one-on-one with
Yeah.
Paul? If it's in
So-
order, I'm.
Well,
fine
and
with
just to
that.
Okay.
clarify, because
So-
I had sent, I think you saw this, but mid-morning this morning on coming out of work, I did send an email questioning whether or not we had discussed this, because it came out, I was surprised to see it, since we had talked about this on March 18th, and as I looked over the minutes, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about it.
Yeah.
So my question was, what's the purpose of the discussion item? And in fact, I feel like our protocol has been, when we want to know what's coming up and we're, can be prepared for it, that we put it under future agenda items. So my question is why? And I also want to point out, coming up on May 15th is the next Special Education Strategic Planning Committee meeting. Jason is the board's rep for that. And so I think some of, at least what we understand to be some of the questions on this tonight, or interests, will come from some of that meeting, and I'd like to see, again, this is next board, but that information get vetted at the May 15th board meeting. So I'm not sure why we're discussing it, but go ahead.
I'm happy to.
I'll withdraw the motion then.
Well,
Okay.
it's not an action item, it's a
No,
discussion
it's
item.
not an action
So I
item.
don't-
It's just a
I'm happy-
discussion
Is there a
item.
reason why you don't wanna discuss
No,
it?
no.
I mean, it's
I'm-
not done improperly.
Well, that's the key. If
that's
it's
been,
not, then
um,
I withdraw that. I was surprised also because I didn't know where this came
Well,
from.
it's been pertinent, I mean,
Okay.
it's
All
been.
right.
Well,
it's been-
I'll get started, and then maybe hopefully I can answer some of it. And I wrote my notes so I could try to be concise. But I did ask for this agenda item. I realized I didn't bring it up at the last board meeting, and under future agenda items, I didn't think of it at that time, so that's why I didn't. But I knew that I had a support of the majority of board members to discuss it, so I felt comfortable putting it on the agenda. And the reason I did is because it's timely that we discuss this now, because because they're working out staffing plans for next year. So we don't want to push this off, no offense, till after May 15th. So that's why I asked for it to be on the agenda. Like I said, it's just a discussion item, some food for thought from me on some things with special ed. And this comes out of feedback we've heard from the community and the update that we had on the special ed strategic plan at the last meeting. I kind of walked away with a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. So bottom line, I'm going to ask everyone, bear with me and let me get through my stuff, but I'm going to put my ask or discussion item out here first, was that I would like to propose that I think that the district should be maintaining the two structured academic classrooms at Ben Franklin. There used to be 3 classes there. We've reduced it down to 2 this year, and we have the space and the staff necessary for it. Our new superintendent has extensive experience in special ed, and I'd like her to have a hand in shaping the future of our district. And work has been done in terms of special ed, but I feel we have a long way to go. And the issues with special ed that were brought up by parents and staff in the spring of 2016 are what led to the audit and the exploration of these changes. And a board committee was formed. So the board, we own this, and I feel it's time for us to maybe step in a little bit. And I want to just be very clear that this board, I feel, has always been very supportive of inclusionary practices. That has not been an issue with us. But where we haven't really talked about things are, we've never said if there are or aren't exceptions and how we're going to handle things. And I want to make sure that we leave our resources in place and have the proper training and support for inclusionary practices to support all of our learners with unique needs and our staff that work with them moving forward. Because if we don't, the kids are the ones that we're going to fail. And I know, I said this at the last meeting, I know the work from Laurel and the Special Ed Strategic Task Force comes from a good place, but I've seen too many times where children have kind of fallen casualty to poorly implemented plans, and I'm concerned that I am a board member and I'm supposed to be informed, and I feel like we're lacking a detailed implementation plan. There's just too many questions to not take a step back for just a minute. The questions we haven't asked are there exceptions? How will we manage them? Or do we need more resources? Is there data to support what we're doing? So I'm suggesting we slow down for a minute, don't mess up what we have in place, not continue to move forward with what we're doing, but think about what we're doing before we pull all of our resources out. These are the reasons that I ask for this. Number one, and this is the biggest reason, is the lack of information that's been shared with the board and the community. I'm going to be completely honest that the information, the Special Ed Strategic Task Force is a board committee, and I've been underwhelmed with details of how this sort of programming is going to be handled. I keep hearing that, and I sent an email about it last spring. My email went unanswered. I never sat down with the admin to discuss my concerns, and I know other board members had urged that to happen. It didn't happen. And here's a very specific example to demonstrate lack of information given to the board. In February 2017, the admin suggested that we eliminate orchestra from 4th grade, and it was presented to the board in a report. It was done in the fiscal year 16-17 program review. And our program reviews may have fallen by the wayside a little bit, but the logic that we used then should still apply to our special ed programming. The report from that February of 2017, it was for orchestra and AEC, but it said that Dr. Gordon provided an overview of the concept of program service review, and he noted that these reviews will help inform the board and the community about these different services and programs and provide an opportunity for the district to share the intended outcome of the service or program. And I feel we haven't done that with this program. And the keywords there are board and community, and we have not been informed of the elimination of the SAT classes. For over a year now, it's always a vague answer. I continue to be referred to the guiding principles, but those don't specify whether or not we need these special SAC classes or not. Then I hear that the team will decide, but if you eliminate the option, what is there to decide? Another couple of quick reasons is continuity of services. We have a structured preschool in place, and we need appropriate placement for students after that. If we can't include these students in a blended classroom for preschool, what makes us think that full inclusion in kindergarten will be successful? Parents and IEP teams can't choose a SAC program if the placement doesn't exist. Cost, if we don't provide appropriate placement, students could probably end up outplaced, and that would end up costing upwards of $80,000 per student a year. Being inclusive does not mean you get rid of any programming that does not sit inside of a classroom. If we did that, we should be eliminating our ELL programs and our AEC programs. That's how I feel we're handling this with special ed, and maybe it's a smaller population, but it shouldn't be treated any differently. Lack of data. We need to be provided data that shows that the classes are not necessary, just as we did for orchestra. Who's monitoring changes, what data is being gathered. We started being inclusive at preschool this past year. Have we evaluated data from that? How is the preschool doing? Are they lacking resources? Do they need more training? What are the takeaways that we're seeing from that? And training, have we provided all of our staff, everyone in our buildings who will interact with students, with the training necessary to manage some really unique needs that they haven't seen before? It's not just about differentiating in a classroom. The way I see it, to eliminate the SAT classrooms, it doesn't align with our special ed strategic plan. Two of the goals were create a plan for increased opportunities for students in the SAC classes to be in their home schools, but it doesn't say eliminate those classes. It also says implement a plan for increased opportunities for students placed outside of D41 to be in their home schools for the 2018-19 year based on individual needs. And I feel if we move forward with this, that we're actually going against that, and we're going to force students out of our district that we're trying to keep in our district. So, long story short, that's my ask. I don't know, it's not an action item, it's an ask of the board. I feel, like I said, this is timely. We're talking about staffing for next year. I'm trying to be respectful with my ask, and I provided the reasons, but I think this is really important. We're trying to do good work, but I'm really struggling to understand why we're moving forward in the manner we're moving when I still have all of these questions about how we're doing it. So that's what I have.
One thing I would say to start is that that's a completely different item, or a completely different ask than that was put forth in
on the agenda. Sorry. That's a completely different ask and a completely different discussion to get rid of a SAT classroom than a discussion on transition and that's shown on the agenda and what's shown in the email. I know that I've had some conversations with Katie and Laurel regarding the transition, given that it is my committee as a board rep, and we had some conversations about transition, some brief ones, given that this email was sent out on, when was it, Friday, I think we saw the agenda. So that's completely different than what's in here.
My concern is the transition that we have, because I think Laurel has already committed that the SAT class for 3rd through 5th grade is going to remain. So my concern is the K through 2 SAT class, which is the transition. And I told this to Paul when we were talking about it.
Are you even prepared to have that conversation tonight?
Concern,
I mean, if you're not, then we can bring it back.
This is what I told to Paul. My concern is what happens when children transition
but
from
if it's told to Paul and not on the agenda to discuss it, would be a violation of OMA. Because we wouldn't have that agenda item out there within 48 hours. Not the discussion to get rid of a SAC room.
I wasn't saying get rid of the SAC classroom.
That's exactly what you just said.
Jason, that's not what you said.
Oh, sorry, to maintain it. You're right, but that item is not on there, though.
Jason,
I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just asking that we keep things as they are, that we don't rush to eliminate something. I'm not asking
right. That's a lot different than
something.
having a conversation on transition.
It's not. First of all, it's not a violation of OMA. There's no action.
Of course, it is a violation of OMA if we want to have a discussion on something that's not on the agenda.
Jason, you're becoming upset. Because
you're damn right I'm becoming upset because this is bullshit.
Don't be demeaning.
Jason,
I'm not being demeaning. I'm being honest.
Jason,
No. I'm being honest in that this is not what was brought forward. Stop. I have a conversation based on a representation that's made in an agenda and in an email, and then I'm told that this representation is not actually what is being asked to discuss. And so I have no problem sitting here and having a conversation regarding transition, and that's a conversation that I had with Katie and the conversation that I had with Laurel, but that's not what your ask is. Your ask is not about transition, it's about a specific room.
Jason, when we had our board meeting on Thursday, did I not talk to you about this in the parking lot?
We did, but that's not
That is
in
what
the ask.
I talked to you in the parking lot.
Right, but that's not in the ask. That's not in the agenda. And that wasn't in the email.
I'm asking to have a discussion about this. That's all I'm asking, is to have a discussion.
If you take action,
this
that's
is
an
not
OMA
an
violation.
action item. I'm asking to have
it's an OMA violation if you discuss something on the agenda that isn't.
No, because then everything and other would be an OMA violation. It's only if you're taking action, Jason.
Jason, you can talk. It's only you cannot take action on something that's not on the agenda. You can talk about anything, but you can't take action about it.
Then you'd have to take other out of the entire agenda, because then you could never talk about anything under other, because it wouldn't be on the agenda.
I'm sorry that there was confusion about what I was asking about, but I was.
No, I know what you wanted, but the ask was different.
Well, I don't think that is true, but the point is, I'm asking the board to discuss it. I'm not asking us to take action. There is no violation of OMA. You can talk about anything you want in a board meeting. That's what we do that under other. You cannot take action unless it is an agenda item. There is no action I'm asking for.
So you're asking tonight for the board to discuss taking.
I'm asking if anybody in the board agrees with me that we need to do something about this.
I have no problem having that discussion, but we weren't prepared to have that discussion.
Jason, you were, because I talked to you about it on Thursday. You don't like the discussion, but you knew exactly what I wanted to talk about.
I could only address what's on an agenda. I could only talk to people within committee about what's on the agenda.
You've been the board rep for a year.
I've been talking about this, and nobody wants to listen to me.
How would you not know the discussion?
How
would you not know any? No, Jason. Part of the problem here, Jason.
No, Jason.
I'm sorry, Jason. Please don't interrupt me. The reality is, you've been the board rep. And as Stephanie said, your reports back to us have been underwhelming. It's almost as if you've been. They've almost been non-existent. And when we found out on a staffing report where the district was going after we've been asking about this for a year. And we've got parents upset about this. They don't even know what's going on because you've been talking and meeting with a committee that has not been reporting properly in terms. So if you want to really get down to technicality, you have not been reporting this properly, and that's why we're at the position we're at, which was triggered by that staffing report. which
let's
we
get
were
into
all
reporting
shocked by,
properly.
Jason. We were all shocked by that staffing report.
And
Everybody
the
should
staffing
have been
report didn't come from
staffing.
this committee. But let's talk about reporting properly.
No,
And I
you
just
mean it
want to
didn't come
put this
from
up.
your committee?
Yeah, it did not come
No,
from
it
this
came
subcommittee.
out of the blue.
So let's talk about proper reporting. And let's talk about the way that the reporting of this committee has gone. This committee has met quarterly for the last 2 years. Following each meeting of the committee, there's been a presentation given by Katie, Laurel, and a little bit of myself. Each presentation following that committee meeting has been a PowerPoint presentation that has been included in the board packet. In addition to that, we have had community listening sessions, which we had, 20-some people show up? I'm guessing, something to that effect. We've had coffees with the SPAC, where specific issues regarding inclusive practices have been discussed in detail. We've also had different community events on inclusive practice topics. After each one of those, these were brought forward. I'd also like to address that as a board committee, these meetings are open to the public, and anyone can attend. If there's issues regarding what's going on, show up. No one has. And we brought back detailed reports every time. And you've had opportunities to question it every single time, and I believe you've answered them.
I disagree.
Well, that's fine, but now here we are 2 years later.
You've not brought back detailed reports, Jason.
Well, tell me what additional questions you want, because I'll sit down and
a staffing
talk.
report is completely different.
Jason.
No, I agree the staffing report is completely different.
Can I address? Can I speak for
We're out of order as a board, if I can just make a comment here. First of all,
I would like to respond to Jason, please.
Please do.
First.
go ahead.
Jason, I appreciate the committee has met, the committee has reported back. Yes, that has been done. I'm not saying those steps haven't been taken, but you know as well as I have that I've been asking some of these questions since last spring. You even said yourself, I know you talked to Paul and said, somebody needs to talk with Stephanie and address her concerns. My questions have never been answered. You've known them for a year. I literally had to pry out of Laurel last meeting that, okay, are we eliminating these classes or are we not? What is our direction going? And I know Erica likes to express disbelief, like Erica's known forever this is happening, but we haven't. This has never
my
been
disbelief is being expressed that we have the Mrs. O'Brien, who's the Director of Student Services, and Dr. McCluskey, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching, Learning, and Accountability, and we spent a significant time on March 18th, I was watching the clock, at least almost an hour and a half on this conversation. What you brought forward, A, is not a board discussion, which is why I sent you this email at 10:07 this morning.
It is a board discussion.
Because, no, you have brought to the table a personal ask.
It's
You
not
have
a
used the
personal
term
ask.
I. Excuse me. You have used the term I. You have made suggestions. You have used the language, our role, board role, how to handle, proper training. I'm not saying those things aren't important. I'm saying that you as an individual board member have opened up this discussion, have opened up your interests as a board discussion, and that's not what we're doing. You have just put forward a treatise, a set of expectations. And my question is, we're now suggesting, laying out the plan for the staff that get hired to do this work. Can you ask questions? Yes. But this is not a board discussion. And my point in writing to you, knowing where I sensed this was going, because you have these concerns and interests.
I have nothing to gain from any of this, Erica. I have no child impacted by any of this, so I don't appreciate that insinuation.
But Jason
I'm not
does.
suggesting.
You know what? That's not the point, because
No.
my child. No.
No.
We're going to bring
No.
my kid into
No,
it.
no,
I'm
no.
talking.
No.
No, because this is my kid.
No.
We're going to bring it
No.
into it.
And
I'm
this
going to
is-
have the conversation. This is not about my kid
Yeah, it
or
is.
any other individual
Jason.
kid. This is
Jason.
about
Jason.
every single kid in this district
Recognize.
and making sure that each individual kid in this district has their needs met, regardless of the needs of that child. This isn't about my kid. This isn't about Steph's kid.
I think we've done that. You're acting as if
Kurt.
this hasn't happened, as if we didn't
point
meet
of
needs.
order is
But
supposed to be
as Stephanie said,
recognized by the chair.
so let's say the SAC program's eliminated. Now we have somebody that doesn't fit in an inclusionary situation, and now that child's being moved out to some other situation in another school in a different thing. Is that exactly what that parent wants? What happens if that parent doesn't want that and you've eliminated that program, Jason? Don't
how
show
do
me
we know
that
that
because it
that's
hasn't
what the point
happened.
is. That's
No,
what
that's
the
not the
point
point.
is.
Driven
The
by the
point is,
individual
if we
student,
wanna
and if the
talk about
parent doesn't
individual
want that,
parents,
we have no option
no.
for them. We
That's
have
what
no
the
option
IEP
for
is
them,
for.
so don't show me that.
That's what the
How
IEP is for.
How does anybody on this board know
Shouldn't we
exactly
ask
that what you just described is asking? We have professional staff members who every day are doing this work, and we don't listen to them. We don't hear
Well,
from them. I mean, my question is this district removing the supports, this is your language, in place for students? Is this district removing supports in place for students? If
So-
you want to have a discussion,
Laurel, hold.
right,
Hold, hold.
we're way off base.
Everybody take a breath.
Way off base.
Let's just take a moment, let's just take a breath here. So the ask, and go back to where I was at. I need to get consensus on this before we start engaging into another conversation. You're asking that, I assume next board meeting, that there would be action taken to continue the K-1, 2 classrooms at Ben Franklin. Is that the ultimate ask? Because you're
I
not
guess.
taking action, because that would, you would
I
have
mean,
to
I
go
don't know.
against what administration has recommended, so you would have to be taking action, or at least having consensus from board. Let me just finish. So we have consensus from board members that we would come back with some kind of report that the board would vote on to continue K-1, 2 SAC classrooms, right?
I guess, can I just clarify and say, I do not wish to have the board take action to direct the administration to do that. My hope was we could have a discussion about it, and maybe the administration could understand there's some valid concerns here, and we need to reconsider how we're doing things. That's how things should be happening. And to be honest, Paul, that's not how it's been happening. And Erica, I apologize. You can sit there. This is not going to be a pretty discussion tonight. It's not. And I'm done sitting here being nice and like, oh, we're going to listen. We're going to just listen to what they say. I can't do it anymore because it's so frustrating. For 2 years, I'm going to refrain from swearing, 2 years.
I swear.
I sat here 2 years on this board when Michelle Gallo said, we're going to bring, guess what, everyone? We're going to bring back all these kids. It's going to be so great. And I sat here and was like, are you kidding me? This is what you're talking about. This is going to be a disaster. And I had you and everyone else except for Kurt Buckles just look at me like I had 3 heads. And that is how things have gone. I've tried to turn things around. It finally took parents coming to board meetings demanding change. And then we still kind of sat around, and I had to sit up here. Now I was on the board and say, Paul, what are we going to do about this? Paul, what are we going to do about this? That change had to be driven because you had 2 board members who were like, well, now we have the community, so we can't ignore them all. So I know I'm supposed to respect the administrators, but too many times I have seen where we have made bad decisions, and I have to go with my gut on this, and I've not been given answers. And the last board meeting was the first time I've finally been given answers, which I basically had to pull teeth to get. And they know I've been asking for it. And I fully support inclusionary practices. I think that kids should be afforded that opportunity, but I am a realist and I know there are exceptions, and I know we are not planning for exceptions. We are setting kids up for failure, and there's going to be no options for them once that happens. And it's not your kid you're talking about, Erica, and it's not my kid, so I don't appreciate that insinuation any more than Jason does. But I'm going to sit here and I'm going to advocate for those families because they deserve it, because we have put something in place that actually has been successful, and to just say, oh, we're just going to take that away because we brought in some expert in professional development and they said we're going to be fully inclusive makes no sense to me. The reasons that I explained, the data that we were given about taking orchestra out of 4th grade, we had all of this data and reports. That was brought to the board. We've seen nothing. Nothing. And that should be a concern to you. We've seen absolutely no data except for to say, oh, we're following our practices, our inclusionary principles. I don't see anywhere in the inclusionary principles that we don't have other programs. I don't see it anywhere outlined there. Nothing do we have documented that says we will eliminate those, and we have not treated this with the same respect that we do the other programs in our district, and I have a big problem with it, and I think we should put on the brakes, and we should reevaluate what we're doing.
Can I ask a
Let me just
question?
step in.
May I ask you just a quick question? Between now and the 22nd, so first of all, I don't feel as a board member that this discussion, based on your asks, can be done without the administration's piece in this. They're the ones doing the day-to-day work. They're the ones, like my question, is the district removing these supports? That's a very specific question. If we've gone here now, this is cracked open, it's what you wanted to talk about. So between now and the 22nd, with this board still in place, I think it is respectful of your concerns, but certainly respectful of the administration who's had to sit here and listen to these questions, to be able to sit down and come and have a conversation about it. I don't think it is going to be productive right now for us to continue discussing individually things. And you've heard me say before, when we don't have a board recommendation before us, I have a problem with that because we need to hear their perspective, et cetera. So to me, you've got your concerns on the table. It seems to me that between now and the 22nd of April, it's fair to turn this over to the administration so that they can respond. It seems to me that
I feel like I'm just going to get the same response that we're
Well, you don't know
that the IEP teams will determine it.
well,
It's going to be
except
driven
you
by
don't know
individual
that.
student needs. That's the answer I've been
Except
getting
for-
for a year.
Okay, well, I want to just back up.
Excuse me, Jason.
We had this conversation in Katie's office in the fall. I don't know if it was this fall or previous fall, what have you, where it was, and I know you were there, I was there, Katie was there, not sure who else was there, we talked about how rolling up inclusionary practices from early childhood, the early grades, early childhood, rolling it up. So that's always been on the table, and you were involved with that conversation. Second, if you want to go to our conversation in the parking lot, we can go there. And I think you brought up a very valid question in our conversation, very valid. And it was a specific question. It was, if we have kids in a structured early childhood classroom that, through that structured early childhood classroom, are not being included in part of the blended early childhood classroom program, how is a district going to support the needs of those children in a general education or a kindergarten environment where they didn't feel those needs could be met in a blended early childhood environment? I think that's a very legitimate question to ask, but that's a completely different question than what was presented, than what you presented earlier regarding specific rooms or programming.
But Jason, the fact, just to respond to that, Bob,
Go ahead, Steph.
the fact that, and I asked that question at the last board meeting, and we don't have solid answers. And if we're starting from the bottom and rolling up, we've already created a separate program in our preschool. All of our preschoolers are not attending a blended preschool program. They're not.
That's
We've
correct.
created a separate program. So if we're not even doing that at the basic level, at a basic preschool level, how can we move forward in kindergarten with that as well? Until you can fundamentally eliminate that at the preschool level, you shouldn't be eliminating it at any other grade level as well.
Well, I think your first part is legitimate. It's a legitimate
disservice.
question. So I think the question needs to then be responded to, and you see what the response is.
I asked it at the last meeting, and I just hear what's going to be. The team will decide. The kids' needs will meet their day. I mean, that's the answer I get. But why do we have a structured program in the preschool? That's separate. That, in my mind, it's like a SAT classroom. We still have that in preschool.
Well, I
There's
mean, I
no
think at
continuity
that
of
point you also
services.
have to get into the workings of the early childhood program, which I'm not really ready to discuss in detail today, and the co-workings of the different classrooms, which have been, really started to become a little bit more blended throughout the year. But like I said, I'm not prepared. I mean, if you guys are, that's fine. But the conversation regarding as to that transition is a conversation that I've had.
Well, maybe we should be asking why. I mean, is this a resource issue? Because
Well,
I don't. There's
the question of why, or is a question as to how? Because the why is clearly straightforward as to What do we expect out of all our kids? And we look at each of our kids as being able to succeed in a general education environment. And it's not about thinking that why shouldn't some kid be there. It's thinking about how can some kid be successful there, and what as a district can we do to support that kid. And if those additional supports aren't sufficient, what else can we do? And if those additional supports aren't sufficient, what else can we do? And trying to figure out a manner in which kids can be successful with their peers. At the end of the day, you may be right. There may be children that need a different environment, but to start at the beginning of our traditional educational programs against the assumption that all children can succeed in a general education environment, to me, is flawed. It should be, how can we support each individual kid to ensure their success?
Jason, our general education environment starts in preschool, no offense.
No, I said our traditional.
It doesn't start at kindergarten, and if we aren't able to do that at the preschool level, it's no different at the kindergarten level. And I appreciate what you're saying. That's
that may be
great.
correct,
That's
or it
great
may
in
not be.
theory,
Right.
but I
Can I
think
get a,
I guess are we acknowledging, are there exceptions, and are we planning for exceptions? Because if we're not, it's going to be very costly to the district. One student gets outplaced, that's $80,000.
And that's the thing. If one student gets outplaced, then we're talking about individual students at a board table. We can't be doing that.
I'm just.
No.
using
I'm
that
just
as
saying.
an
But that's how
example. I'm just
specifically.
using it.
I think
If 3 students get outplaced, that's.
so. After
And you do the math. I'm
perhaps
just trying to.
a lot of digging through the morass, Jason, you've acknowledged, Stephanie, you've stated that there is a how question. It seems that how question has to do with navigating the blended pre-K into kindergarten. That's a question that, Laurel, either you're prepared to offer an answer to speak to. Perhaps you have addressed it in the past, but not in ways that are maybe direct enough. Or we could put this on the agenda as a future board item to address the question and allow Laurel to do any additional prep. If you needed it, I think we would defer to you. But we've honed it down to this question, right? That's the key question. I think an answer is appropriate, and you're asking for that answer. And it may not satisfy everybody on this board. At some point, we're going to have to accept that we're getting a lot of information. We may not all agree with the answer, and then it's going to be, do we defer to the district, do we defer to our expert to implement this, or do we substitute our own perspective on it and hold out and push simply because we disagree? Which I'm hoping, if this issue is, given the seriousness of this issue, this isn't going to degrade into simply my personal feelings, and I either agree or disagree. Far too much is at stake. So I'd like to ask Paul, if it's appropriate, to ask Laurel if she can answer the question tonight. And if not, then I'd like to go back to that original, what was part of my motion.
Clarity on what we're trying to do here, because it has changed, just in the moment
Yes.
of going back and forth here.
It has.
So I just want to be clear with what you want from us. Is that it, Stephanie?
I'm not
That's
really sure
you
what
and
I'm not really sure what question.
Well, what
I guess.
you and I talked about was
About
this whole
navigating
transition.
the
You and I
blended.
spoke about a pre-K,
To
the
kin-
blended, the structured
Yeah,
classroom,
right.
and the transition. That's what you and I talked about. That's what I wrote in the exec summary, and that's what board members.
Yeah, and that's what you and I talked about.
So if
and
that's what
I
we're talking about, I did ask Laurel to talk on that issue, if that's what the board wants to talk about. But because this is
I'm
still
willing to
board
honor your
discussion,
request.
and I don't want to hand it over to staff yet until the board is comfortable. That's,
I'm
those were
fine
the
with that
guidelines.
conversation, because that's a conversation that we talked about having. I mean,
I'll
if we're gonna
respect that
if we're going to
request from
start
the
talking
board.
about classrooms, that starts bringing in a much broader issue as to student placement. It has to do, especially if we're talking about a classroom at one particular school, what kind of spacing is available at other schools. Are those same kind of spaces going to be made available to children at other schools? Are there due process concerns? Are there at least restrictive environment concerns that I don't know if people are ready to address today?
Has that decision been made? I mean,
my
we're
point
almost,
being,
we're in the middle of April.
Those are very
So
good questions.
I would think that we should know the answer to that, and I think that's Stephanie's frustration, is that it almost feels like we're moving people down the road, continue to move them down the road, and then outdistance them, and then do what we're gonna do.
Stephanie's questions are legitimate. I just don't like how it was brought up. Some of these questions are very legitimate, regarding that transition. How is it going to occur? That's very legitimate.
I just need to get board consensus. This is your discussion right now, and to engage staff in it, I need the board to consent on, is that what we're going to be talking about here with your staff?
But
Well, I think,
I think that the valid question though is, because to your point, to Jason's point, every child is different. So how their transition from preschool to kindergarten may be different. The question is a broader scale in that if we're putting them into exceptions at the preschool level, what has changed when we transition from preschool to kindergarten that we no longer see the need for that exception?
Hold right there.
Does that
That's
is
a
that
great,
the question?
is that okay for the
That's
board
a
to?
very good.
That's a
So
very.
that-
Why
that's
is
the
there no
question.
longer an
Supportive of
exception?
asking that question.
So are we comfortable with that as the
Yeah.
question?
Yes.
Same question.
All right. So Laurel, on that question around a preschool structured
Should we write
program, and how would they transition into a general education kindergarten setting that we have, if we do not have a K-1-2 SAC program at Ben Franklin? Would that be?
I guess no. I think the question is why does the exception exist in preschool, but we no longer feel it does in K through 2?
Now,
That's the question. Not how will they transition. Is we can recognize an exception in preschool, but not K through 2.
Well, and
Why?
my caveat is that question correct in how it's framed, so that we're understanding it?
all right, we're closer.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand it to Laurel to ask for clarifying questions, because you're going to be the one answering this.
So,
How you doing tonight, Laura?
I guess I will start with a clarifying question because I don't believe that it's an exception. So I really did think that the question was about transition from early childhood to kindergarten, but I don't see it as an exception. So that's where I'm trying to clarify and understand that point.
But
So
you
a
don't.
student in a structured program, how would they transition into a kindergarten classroom? Because our structured programs are for students.
I guess I'm saying we've created different buckets in our preschool, which in my mind that isn't we're identifying an exception.
Mm-hmm.
So what is happening when they transition from those preschool years to kindergarten? How does that transition happen when now we're no longer recognizing that exception, that need? Because there's obviously things that are happening in those classrooms that are different.
Well, you may not like this answer. I really first want to say that I really do believe in the integrity of that strategic plan committee, and I've been absolutely impressed with how they have worked through and talked through all of the 4 areas that were developed prior to my coming here and starting in this work, and taken everything so seriously. And I have to give those kudos out to those stakeholders across this community, because it has been taken with such seriousness that everybody who is a member of this community should be proud of how they think of every child as a learner. And this includes children who have disabilities that might be high incidence and disabilities that might be low incidence. So some of these issues are relative from a student who may have a learning disability and have dyslexia as an example, all the way to a student who may have multiple impairments. It's really important to your question, because when I hear exception, I can look at that one of 2 ways. Either there are no exceptions or they are all exceptions. And whether or not we like it, the fact remains that you're right, we have had and we do continue to have a classroom at the early childhood level that is established for students who have disabilities and who the early childhood diagnostic team has determined would make progress towards their goals and objectives in this classroom that has only children in it who have disabilities. So that's the classroom we're talking about. Now, I don't know the entire history of that classroom, but I do know that in the time I have been here, and at least for the 1 year prior, because those were the students I came to know as I stepped through the door who were in kindergarten, that not every student in that, what you might think of as a self-contained, or as you refer to as SAC classroom, went to a self-contained or a SAC kindergarten. That's a fact. So as we sit here now, there's nothing new in terms of exceptions having been made for individual students in that classroom. It is typical for a classroom in that early childhood level that has children in it who have disabilities and who are not blended with their more typical peers. It is typical for a classroom like that to have, say, between 6 and 10, could reach up to 12, but 6 and 10 kids. Never, to my knowledge, and some of you may know more going back further, but never to my knowledge have all of those children transitioned into kindergarten in a self-contained setting. I don't believe that's true. And I don't believe prior to those students being at Ben Franklin that they all transitioned to a program outside of District 41. So I think that's a really important place for us to start. So whether we want to call that the exception or the rule, every year that diagnostic early childhood team and every year those receiving kindergarten teams have had to get together through the IEP process and talk about and determine how they would meet an individual student needs. Now, again, because I heard a lot of the discussion, you might not like this, but it is well vetted. IDEA, the federal law, the rules and regulations are well vetted through the court system. The procedural safeguards for parents are fantastic. They are solid. And we are here in a really symbiotic relationship to help uphold those procedural safeguards for parents as the educators. So it's sort of amazing when you think about it, that if that process really works, it works really well because the kid is at the heart of it. And the amazing thing to me is that each time a student comes to the forefront and that IEP team has worked not just this year, but prior to this year to transition that child to kindergarten, they have thought through together how they would meet that child's needs and how they would make a recommendation for the child's placement in kindergarten that's reasonably calculated so that that child will make meaningful progress. And of course, that includes all of that student's individual educational circumstances. Some of those students last year went to the classroom at Ben Franklin. Some of those students last year went to their general education kindergarten classes at their home schools. The same thing applies this year. And it works really well. What is different this year is that the Strategic Plan Committee has worked in implementing year 2 of the strategic plan, which includes offering increased opportunities for students who are in that SAC class at the preschool level to be in their home schools. That is now a statement. It now is consistent with our inclusionary principles. It is also consistent with another huge area of the strategic plan, which is professional development, because we didn't take this lightly either. So we had Joyce Centers come as someone who is a consultant and who is an expert in the state of Illinois and work specifically with our early childhood, not with everybody in D41, but we identified, based on those needs that were expressed to us through our process to look for what professional development was needed, to provide someone who was an expert to those teams in early childhood. We had her come not only to observe and to talk individually with teams, and that included teachers, it included aides, it included other specialists, but we also had her provide in-service opportunities to talk about best practice in inclusionary practices for children who are 3, 4, and 5. We simultaneously had those same teachers and teams go to, it's called the Pyramid of Interventions through the Early Childhood Consortium, and begin learning about those social emotional pieces that are so important to start at those early ages, and how that creates a base for students to step through at that early young developmental age of 3 and start to learn how to interact appropriately with their peers, much of which has an element and a component about inclusionary principles. And then in addition to this, and actually fantastically, because we were able to receive the competitive grant, the Preschool for All grant, we were able to add in coaching from that Preschool for All ISBE consultant, to come and provide best practices on how we're actually assessing our program. And I mean, this stuff is stringent. It's not a cakewalk. How we're assessing students within that learning environment across those programs in early childhood. All of this comes together to say, back to the question, why, I think, and how, that we're going to continue to do the things we've done before, and now we've added a whole boatload of professional development to help our early childhood educators continue to learn and grow. But actually, we've done more, because the part that also became so important was our internal work. And while we did this across the whole district, we had a focus on, and we talked about here in front of the board, on really making sure that we looked at those earliest learners and we thought about the opportunities we could provide for them in connecting them to our general education curriculum, and then looking at the outcomes that we would look for our learners when they are culminating and when they're finishing 8th grade and ready to go on to high school. And we thought, okay, how do we grow it here and grow it here, and then really make sure that they can transition through. So in doing that, we've had all the way along time that has been provided and designated by Dr. Gordon to say, I need the ad team to come together on several occasions. Wish I could count them off the top of my head, but I would say at least 6 occasions, to come together and work, beginning with our beliefs, which is our mission, our vision, and our mission, and those inclusionary principles, and then connect that work up to start with those earliest learners and make plans really specifically at each building level about what that needs to look like to prepare for students to come back or to matriculate up, if they were never gone, to their home schools. We also included our coaches to have those instructional support coaches as a resource and to think through, again, that connection to the general education curriculum. And you all might remember that we added in the Lucy Calkins phonics as a piece, again, just another example on that end of how do we make sure that all of our learners are having an opportunity at those young grade levels, so that when they're coming from early childhood up into K1, 2, we're addressing some of those needs that may be those really early learner needs in literacy. So the transition piece is not a one and done easy answer, and maybe that's what you don't like about it, or maybe that's what doesn't seem clear when I answer your questions. But I will tell you with 100% certainty that we are absolutely using the process that was put before us through IDEA. And I will further ask of you, with all due respect, that you let us do it. Because honestly, when we can have those conversations, Katie and I have offered to every parent who has expressed a concern, come and talk to us. We will have an individual conversation. We'll have a conversation with you and with the principal or the assistant principal or another member of your building's team. Come and talk to us. We'll talk about what those concerns are so that we can create an agenda for that IEP meeting, for that process to really address your individual child's needs. That's what we want to do. And honestly, I think we owe that to every kid who steps through D41, because I don't believe myself that there is any kid who is your typical or your average kid. I think every kid has some specific need that we should all be honing in on. And I really believe that we've done a good job. I'm impressed with what we've done these last 2 years, and I wish that I could have vocalized to you better. I would ask anybody on the board or anybody here to please look at that tab under the Student Services Department. Please look at that strategic plan. Look at year 1. Look at year 2. Look at the community listening session from last school year. We are working hard to communicate the work that's going on, and it is going on across this district. I mean, seriously, kudos to the teachers who have said every day, how can I help? And you know what they're asking now? What can I do this summer? I would like to come in and be a part of working with the next year's team so that I can help that child that I've learned and know so much about now transition up to the next level. That's amazing.
That answer.
No, I mean, I guess it doesn't answer my question, because we're still, the inclusionary practices and the goals for the plan were to find more opportunities for things to happen. And I think, that's the work that you've been doing, but, nowhere in here does it say that one size fits all. And I feel like you didn't really answer the question. I mean, you fully admitted that there is a different programs at the preschool, and that some of those students, when they've left the program, that more have been able to go to their home school, but it's not there's no requirement in any of this that says every student has to go to their home school. And you've admitted that there were some students that went to Ben Franklin. So there still seems to be some sort of a need, and maybe exception isn't the right way to describe it, but I mean, I feel like even in conversations I've had with you, Laurel, you've said, there isn't one size fits all. I mean, in education, we're trying to do our best and fit and put kids where it's appropriate. Appropriate is the word we should be using. But what I'm struggling with is we're seeing different placements at the preschool level, but then beyond there, we're not providing there's no other options. And I don't know, have the IEP teams been told, I mean, are they all fully meeting saying, well, we have these and these are our different options? I mean, the IEP team isn't going to meet and create a program that no longer exists. They're going to work in the confines of what we have in our district. And we're eliminating something that we have now that you've admitted that we still have children that that's been the most appropriate placement for them. And once you eliminate it, it's not an option for the teams to even choose, and people feel like their hands are tied, and they're basically, I think, are probably feeling forced into a decision. And I struggle with it because I feel like we're taking this resource away. As I demonstrated in all the information I gave, it's not something that we've discussed with the board, and I appreciate that the team has worked hard. I don't disrespect anybody. I know a lot of people on that task force. I don't disrespect any of them and the work that they've done. But it is still something, like I said, when it comes to programming and something that's it took a number of years to kind of get footing at Franklin to change that and to not talk about that with the board and address some of those concerns. I mean, the community's never had a chance to weigh in on it, or the board. It's just been the strategic task force. I know we had a listening session, but it was never talked about at a listening session where the community as a whole could address that's where we were going. While we were moving towards inclusionary practices, we were also going to eliminate this programming. There's never been a discussion with the community about that, ever, because I've never.
Well,
Can I get some
I think
clarity?
that's,
Well,
I mean.
Go ahead, Laurel.
I mean, it's really hard because I feel like every time this comes up and you feel like I'm dodging a question, I'm dodging talking about people's individual children. That is so inappropriate for me to do at this table.
No.
So
And I'm not
please
trying to talk
know
about
that
individual
every time
children.
you bring this up, this is a small community. It is a small school district. It is so easy when I start naming 1 and 2 students for anybody in this room or who might be watching from anywhere to identify who I am talking about. It
And
is
I'm
a
not
very
trying to do
simple
that.
equation.
Nope.
That being said, I am not, nor is the committee, eliminating anything. What we have to recognize and what we have to realize and what we have to celebrate is that we are getting better. We are getting better at what we have done before. I think this school district, from what I can see and from what all the metrics show us, has done a fabulous job of educating students. And I look at the reports that come through on scores, and we are hands down a place where anybody should want to raise their children. So what do we have to get better at? We have to get better at how we do that with kids in their home schools, because that becomes more and more in line all the time with IDEA, with the spirit of that law. And when we do that, we will not have a class anymore of students who are one type of student with one type of need. We won't. That is a celebration. It shows that we're getting better. So when I throw numbers at you, forgive me, because I do not mean to violate anything for any parent or any child in this community. But there are no students next year, there are no students who sit at Ben Franklin as we sit here now who would be at that kindergarten, first, second grade level. 0. And so it's an interesting thing to me because guess what? It's not a phenomenon. The part that would be a phenomenon if we had sort of that like learner of student every year and we had scores and scores of them. Name your disability category. There are 14 in Illinois under IDEA. That would be really something. But instead, it's economy of scale. It's a matter of looking at our statistics and our numbers, and you aren't going to have this pop of like learners every year at every grade level. But the other thing that is really something to celebrate is that the reason we don't even have a couple is because we're doing our work better. And people are willing to be vulnerable. The educators are willing to say, I'll do it. Show me how. Teach me how. Let me do a better job. And sometimes they're even upset about it. How do I do this? I want to do it, but I don't know how. I'm worried about it. It's not a question of resources. I think we have the resources. We've been able to assure our teachers that if students come back to their home schools, we will help. We will provide that resource for what you need. Please write the IEP for what the student needs, for what's appropriate for that student to make the meaningful progress. I'll advocate for that before this Board of Education all day long. But I don't know why we have to do it at a center school. I don't know what the merit is in saying there is one place that does it better, or what the merit is in saying we can put these kids all together because they have some one thing that we'll have to search for, we'll have to seek out every year. They don't exist. I can't make them up. And the kids who do exist that maybe before would have been educated that way, maybe last year, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, you have lots of thanks to give to those educators for saying, show me how, and I'll do it better.
Do they not exist at the preschool level, though?
Not all one type of disability.
But you're in one building, right? You're at a center school in one building, and you've got separate entities of classes there. I think that's the question: is you're going from that point. So are you disbanding that part of it as well?
Well, our goal would be
into their home schools?
Our goal would be to continue to increase those blended opportunities. Absolutely. We did increase it this year. Our goal would be to increase it further next year. We didn't do it all at once this year. You are so right about that. And that was because of the professional learning and the professional development that was needed. And we're not done with that. I mean, we'd be foolish to say that will ever be done. We have to continue. And each time we think we get it right, there will be a student, there will be a family who either moves in here or has a new little one, and that new little one will come to us with some different needs that we haven't yet thought about. I just feel like every time we talk about it, we are thinking about these kids with multiple needs. We're thinking about kids with all kinds of needs, and they exist across our whole preschool right now.
And I'm not trying to clarify, put certain needs in a bucket. I mean, all kids have differing needs. My concern is if you look at our preschool level, we're differentiating at a preschool level based on, I don't know if you want to say ability or need or whatever it is, but we're not recognizing that beyond that. And do we need to have, we're eliminating, and you just a minute ago said we're not looking to eliminate anything, but at the last board meeting you told me we were trying to eliminate the SAT classes and that IEPs would drive it. But if you eliminate something, it's no longer an option. And my concern is there, and I don't know what the criteria is for it. I'm not trying to establish it. I'm not trying to say if you're this, this, and this, you fall into this bucket. But do we have something that do we have no other option for some of our students that may need another option? And we have another option at the preschool level. We don't have any other option beyond that. And that's what bothers me. What's changed from preschool to kindergarten that we no longer have any other options? And I do think, I mean, we've talked about inclusionary practices for a long time now, and I've looked at other school districts and how they do things. And there are other school districts do have programs for kids based on differing needs. That doesn't mean that they're not inclusive and they're not including kids when at all possible. I mean, in my mind, inclusion looks different for every child, and maybe based on the needs, there has to be some other options within our district. I guess I feel like I don't know. I feel like we're going to be taking something away in the name of inclusion that's going to be detrimental to some kids that are going to it's going to go completely contrary to what we're trying to do, and they're going to end up outplaced because we're going to have absolutely no options for them. So what I'm just trying to say is, that's the road we seem to be going down, but maybe we need to stop for a second, because I get the impression from that there is no option for kindergarten next year. That's it. There is no option besides you just go to kindergarten and we'll figure it out. And I have a concern about it. That's why I brought it to the board. That's why I'm talking about transitioning from those preschool classes to the kindergarten classes. And I have no skin in the game in this one, but I mean, I've lived it from experience, so I guess I can speak from that. And personally, I think that makes me an expert as a parent. And, I mean, I'll just be honest. I think that we all want what's best for our kids. We all want them to be included and to be part of community. And the classes that we have, you're balancing two things. Are we saying, oh, they're going to go to their home school, or maybe there's a program that they could be involved in that maybe serves different needs that they have that are more that outweigh the other needs that their peers have. And so there is a benefit to that. And I think that parents are realistic and recognize that and would rather have their kids' needs met in an appropriate environment versus, oh, go to the school that's a block away. I think we are eliminating we're completely dismissing the work that also has happened and the growth. I mean, when we talk about growth, where's the data to talk about the growth we've seen in some of those programs with those kids versus kids that aren't? Like, that's what I'm looking for. We haven't seen anything. And I know from personal experience, there's tremendous growth. And it just saddens me that I feel like we're going to do a 180. We're going to just say, okay, we're fully inclusive, get rid of all that, and then we're going to drive people out of our district because they're going to be frustrated and not have any other option. there is value in the classes and the work that they do there. You know, I don't know what's driving a lot of this. I mean, I'll just be honest. I mean, I had a conversation with Paul, and it bothers me that I heard from him, well, there's nothing magical that happens in the classes at Ben Franklin that they couldn't do in any other class, because I completely disagree. I mean, I think the work they do there, it's different. It's different work than we're doing in our other classrooms. And I don't think if you were to take, I'll use my kid as an example because we can't talk about other kids. I can talk about my kid. If you were to take them and put him in his home school, and basically most of his academic day is spent by himself with a resource teacher, it's going to be completely different from what he gets now, and it would not be better, in my opinion. And I don't know. Like, so I said, I just think we need to we seem to have the resources, we seem to have the space. I haven't seen the data to support what we're trying to do, when I still see at a preschool level, we're recognizing there's some differing needs that we have to differentiate for. Those children from June 5th or whatever, 6th, their last day of school, till August 28th, those children are not changing that much in those couple of months. And it's not continuity of services, and something that exists and we're taking away. And I understand trying to phase it out and include more children, which we should, because we definitely should. But I think anyway, I've gone on too long, but I guess that's where I'm at with it. And I don't really feel we're answering the questions. We just talk around how we want to give kids the appropriate IDA and inclusionary principles. But like I said, we've recognized an exception in preschool, but we're not at the kindergarten level.
So one thing you left out a little bit of my conversation with you, that nothing magical within that classroom that can't be portable and brought into the general education setting, or that can't be brought into any other school to support that student. Because I believe in our teachers, and I believe in the work that they do, and the incredible work on a daily basis with each of our kids. So miss the portability piece, miss the piece that it can't be in any school in our district. The other piece, just asking this question. So Laura, because you know these students, the rest of us don't, who are in preschool, when you look at the group of students, is there anything, when you look across the board, that we could not service their needs in their home schools? Because that's ultimately the question, is there something missing? Would something be missing from their educational experience if they went from our structured preschool program and they didn't go to our traditional Ben Franklin program? Is there something missing that you would be able to say, man, you're going to have a great experience, but you're going to miss X, Y, and Z? Because I think that at the core of this is the question.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, so we're eliminating this program. I mean, I didn't know it was being eliminated, came about. So, I mean, this would be like eliminating FLES and board report.
Actually, a lot different, because I think she said the last meeting that this isn't about
But
getting
wait, can I
rid of
talk?
the classroom. She
Can I
actually
talk?
said that it would
Can I
be
talk?
there
Can
if
you
it
not
was
interrupt
needed.
me?
But you just misconstrued what she said.
Well, you think you think.
Bruce,
Go ahead, Bruce.
Should I just-
Jason,
go
don't
ahead,
interrupt him, please. That's out of order.
You're right. It was out of order. I agree.
So, I mean, I've heard parents who are like, I'm comfortable with my child at Ben Franklin, and they come to an IEP meeting from what I've heard, and they're basically told, yeah, you're gonna go to your home school, and that's it. There's just no option. It's being eliminated. And the parents at that point have no choice other than to accept what the district's doing for them. Is that correct?
Issue with the characterization of that, because I don't think that's how the conversations are going at all. And I don't have Jeff Burke here or Sarah Rodriguez here, but I have great respect for them, and I think that they are taking great caution and an extreme amount of time to talk with every parent and to talk through how we are working to try to meet the needs of their students and whether or not there's an option for students to go back to their home school. And in fact, for those students in the intermediate grade levels, that is exactly why really more of that choice went to parents relative to whether or not that transition would make sense at this point in time, because we didn't want to ask a student to make a transition at an intermediate time and then have to make another
Right.
transition to
But a child in
middle
K or 1, if a parent had a child in kindergarten or first grade, and let's say they were going into first grade this coming year, and they've been at Ben Franklin, and I don't know any of the kids, I don't know, if this exists or not. The parent was comfortable with a child in kindergarten at Ben Franklin, and that's kind of what they think is best for their child. They have no option to have that child at Ben Franklin like they would wish, because that program's being eliminated, right?
So,
It's a yes or no.
well, I'm not going to just answer yes or no. Here's why. Comfortable is not the goal of education. It's not my job at all. And I really am actually offended by that being the job, because the job is to make sure that child makes growth, makes progress in the general education curriculum, is actually having a meaningful educational experience, and that child can continue in light of all his or her circumstances to grow throughout their education. So if I agreed with that there's huge fault in that. I also really am strong, and I talk with every IEP team about this, and if somebody tells you I haven't, I'd be glad to sit down whatever time tonight or tomorrow and talk about it. Facilitating independence. Because as we sit here, it is so easy for us to talk about what's best for a child, but really we can do a lot for kids. We can do a lot for kids. What's hard is to help a child learn how to do it for him or herself. What's hard is to think about what that goal should be for that child after they're done with us. And so we have the job to really work ourselves out of a job and to really keep grappling with how do we build, how do we facilitate independence for every individual child.
I also want to say, and I know that this isn't something that has just come up like in the last couple of weeks. And Linda, I think you could actually speak to this as well, in that I know Jeff Burke has reached out prior to this school year to each of the individual elementary school principals to develop a plan. So for those principals to get to know the kids that were at Ben Franklin, that were homeschool kids of schools outside of Ben Franklin, to get to know those kids, to have conversations regarding those kids, not necessarily to preordain what's going to happen, but to get to know those kids. So conversations regarding what's best for individual kids could be had. Regarding your question as to whether decisions have been made for kids could stay at Ben Franklin or go back to their home schools or what have you, I don't remember the grade levels exactly, but I did have that specific conversation with Jeff and Sarah relatively recently. And the conversation was some children had decided that would be best for their kids, and decisions have been made to stay at Ben Franklin. I don't know the grade levels. We weren't talking about individual students. And others, decisions were made to go to their home schools. Like I said, I don't know the grade levels, but I know that those conversations have been had on individual basis.
I just want to say, I get frustrated in that, Bruce asks a question and the immediate response is as if he's attacked the principal and assistant principal at Franklin, which he did not do. When we've asked questions, we get a dialogue on as if laws are being broken, we're following law. Nobody said that. No one's attacked the committee. You've implied that that's occurred, but nobody's attacked the committee. He asked a simple yes or no question regarding what a parent's beliefs would be. It still hasn't been answered, and I think that's the frustration here. But please don't answer questions by stating that somehow we're offending someone or attacking someone. It's a question that's being asked. No one's attacking the principal and assistant principal at Ben Franklin, because what happens with that narrative is then the next
I
day,
don't think
is
Bruce
someone
was
says,
attacking the principal.
Mr. Curry attacked, did you know that? He attacked, because that's how Laurel answered the question. That was never any part of what, he never brought them into the conversation. You brought them into the conversation, and I'm sorry, you may not like what I'm saying, but that shouldn't happen. Just answer the questions instead of taking it to a level that says somehow a committee's being attacked or somehow this is happening. They're legitimate questions. I still have the same questions. I don't know that we're going to solve them tonight, so that's maybe where we need to go, is maybe staff can go ahead and regroup and take into what we've considered here. But we still have a preschool. We still have it across the street. We still have it segregated out. And then we're being told that doesn't work here. So, again, please leave the, our committee's done great work. No one said the committee didn't do great work.
Oh, yes, I did hear that the
Yeah, I was
committee did
gonna
not
say,
do
you
good
did
work.
say that.
I absolutely heard that. And I also want to be really clear that we do have the preschool across the street.
What board member said the committee did poor work?
I heard Mrs. Clark say that earlier tonight, and that the reporting was poor as well.
Underwhelmed with the information.
Yes.
With the information.
I
That's-
have
As
but
well
see,
as the
that's-
work.
That's my point. No, I'm sorry, but to take what she said about being, no, I'm sorry. To take what she said about being
inappropriate at this
no,
point.
it's not inappropriate.
We should not be
No,
arguing.
no.
We should not
Sorry.
be arguing with staff.
Sorry.
All right.
To take that statement, I'm sorry, to take that statement that she said she was underwhelmed with the information she'd received, which quite frankly falls on you and
No,
you.
it falls on me.
On both.
It's my report.
That does not mean, you cannot construe that. And that's how these narratives start and these rumors start, to say that somehow, oh, I heard that. No, you didn't hear that. You got offended by it and then you took it to that point. But I'm sorry, that's wrong. And that's the thing that I'm addressing with you. That's wrong.
Well, I'm not really sure.
Stop.
I'm not really sure where to.
Let's put an end to this, because we can keep going back and forth, and that's not going to solve anything. You know where our administration is at on this, where we believe that we can offer those same opportunities in each of our home schools. That's where we're at. We don't believe that you have to have a center school. We don't believe that.
I know, Paul, but I think a lot of parents do. I think a lot of parents.
But it's been on this plan for 2
No, it
years.
hasn't.
No,
It has
that's
not.
the point.
that's
This is the point that we've been at.
That's fine.
That is
Well,
the
we
point.
haven't heard.
No,
It has never been the plan. The plan never was all kids would be put in there. That never
Stephanie,
was.
isn't part
Here,
of.
you guys tell me to stop. You want
Oh my gosh.
you want an environment. You want a classroom.
Right.
That's what you're asking for.
No, I'm
yes,
just-
you are.
Yes, you are.
Yes, you
You're,
are.
you
Just
are,
stop.
you are
Just
asking
stop.
to keep the
You
exact
want a
same
classroom
form.
that
Just say
holds
what you want.
3 to 4
Right.
kids
Just say what you
with
want.
some significant needs at the K1, 2, 3, 4, 5 level. That's what you want. We're saying we're going to be delivering that at each of our home schools. That's the difference. We believe in every kid in here that they can have these opportunities at their schools. We don't believe you have to have a center school to do this. That's only the difference. Honestly, that is the difference here.
But
My
can you
concern-
say that every one
Can
of
I-
those children that may have had the opportunity at Ben Franklin, that going forward, that none of those children would be outplaced somewhere else outside of this district?
You can never
Well,
say
you
that because you
don't-
I
can't
can't say
control
that in
future events.
general.
But what
Well,
we
I think
can
this is
say,
where-
Why can't
that
you
as
do
a
that?
district,
If
whoa,
they
whoa,
were-
whoa,
if
whoa,
they
whoa,
could
whoa,
go
whoa,
into
stop.
Franklin,
I'm
if
going
they
to answer
could
your
go into-
question. We can't predict the future. We can't predict what's going to happen with individual kids. What we can control is the services that we provide each individual kid. And I think that I can guarantee that as a district that we're going to work to make sure that each and every kid is given the supports that that individual kid needs to succeed. And let me just be clear on this. Those supports are going to change. And those supports are at times going to be insufficient. And they're going to need to be supplemented. They're going to need to be amended. They might need to be completely reworked, and we are going to mess it up. We are. And I'll apologize for that now. That being said, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to try to support each and every individual kid, especially given that a lot of this is just is what it is. It's controlled by each individual IEP. It just is.
Can I?
Okay,
I just
keep
want
going.
to.
Figure out where we're going.
I just want to say 2 more things here. I mean, first of all, it should be driven by kids. but what we're putting in place should be better than what we have now. And I've been given no information that tells me that what we're going to be doing is better. There's a lot of questions, and that's my concern, that we need to do better than what we're doing now. And
Just up on
I
that
just,
one, just to say this piece.
We can
The
address
hard,
that.
the hard part on that one is because it is every individual kid. Every individual kid, and we can't report to you on each. That's the hard part. It's almost an impossible bar for administration to jump over, because we would have to tell you what occurred with Paul. Paul's that preschooler moving forward. I would have to tell the board members, this is what Paul's getting, and that's why we believe it is better, which would be absolutely inappropriate. So that's that hard piece where we're not, and I said this to you on the phone, I am not trying to frustrate you with this. But it's hard when we do talk about individual kids, when we are looking, we're not looking at a center school any longer, because now you're really talking about what is Paul doing at Forest Glen or Lincoln or Churchill. So that's that really hard piece for us to talk to you about. What does that look like for Paul in his day? That we can't do that. We have laws around us that we can't talk about that child. So that's that hard part. So that's why I wanted to just stop on that one point.
well, and I guess, I mean, I wasn't on the strategic task force committee, so I don't have a say in this, but like I said, I have experience, and I think that's where I fundamentally disagree with you, and I have real concerns for our students moving forward, is that when I talked about how you said there's nothing magical that happens at Franklin that can't happen in other schools, that was no disrespect to our teachers in all of our schools. The point of that is there are things being done in those classrooms that you're not going to be able to replicate in our gen ed environment, because it's different things that they're doing. It's very different. It's very different. Very different things they do in the structure preschool than they do in our blended preschool. So when I hear there's nothing magical that happens there that can't happen anywhere else, I disagree with that, because there are things that are happening that I think are valuable to kids, for them to grow and to be part of our society. And I worry that because of inclusion, because we just have this pie in the sky, we're going to be inclusive, we've pushed that aside, and we're forgetting about really how it's impacting the kids. And if I look at it from a resource standpoint, I mean, look at the resources that we have at the one school. I mean, the resources there are experts in managing some of those things. Now we're going to have experts at all of our buildings. I don't know that we have we trained all of our staff in all of our buildings, all the service providers, all the teachers, to prepare for that. And I'm not saying we can't do that, but I don't know that we're there yet, to be honest.
And well, I think
Well, we don't even
that's
know
exactly
those.
what
We
Laurel
don't
said.
even know.
She talked about
Okay,
professional
let me
development.
finish. And
But that's on
It-
the preschool
that's-
level, though,
but
right?
that's-
Wasn't it?
those are the things we haven't done yet, and it concerns me when I hear, oh, well, we're eliminating this. And I don't know that we've done all of these things that we need to do. And I don't know how you can just say we're eliminating something when I know I've had conversations with Laurel to say there is exceptions. And I'll throw myself and my child out there. When I am told that your son, he can go to Hadley, and we think he's capable of so much more than he's been exposed to at Ben Franklin. And when he goes to Hadley, he can be educated in a math class with the gen ed students. I mean, I honest to God laughed when I was told that, because my son is doing math at a kindergarten level, and we've had neuropsych evaluations done of him. He'll be lucky in his lifetime if he can probably get to maybe like a 4th, 5th grade level. So I know what the expectation is for him. That's not to say I don't hold out hopes for the world for him, but I also need to be realistic about his ability level and his frustration level. And it is not realistic to tell me that you can put my child in a 6th grade math class and he's going to learn math in that class. They'll differentiate to him to kindergarten. I mean, you might as well be teaching in Chinese. It will be so frustrating to him, and I've lived it before. We tried this in this district in 3rd grade with him, and literally I got called every day from the principal. My son, I'm going to get personal here. Kurt's heard this story, I know. he literally, and I'm going to get upset when I say this, he started like, the behavior was off the charts, started having accidents every day at school, every single solitary day, because we were like, he's going to be a gen ed all day long because that's what he needs. That's what we're going to do. It was awful. And my point is, the kids are the ones impacted by this. And I know that at Hadley, it'll probably carry out because you have a bunch of kids coming together and it's going to be a numbers game. But at Hadley, those students, like my son, and I'm not advocating for Hadley. Let's be clear about that, because Hadley seems to be all set. This is nothing personal for me. I have no skin in the game. I'm going to get a lot of heat about it, but I'm going to advocate for these little kids so kids get what they deserve. But at Hadley, those students who are 4 or 5 years behind their peers academically, they're in a different environment. They're learning to go to the grocery store, how to grocery shop, things that my 3rd grader could probably do and I've never had to teach him. They're learning a different skill set that is valuable. So to say things that happens in these classes are not magical, they're doing different things that are important to those kids. And maybe there's not like a set rubric that we follow for who goes in there, but I think we have to recognize at a certain point, maybe there is value, more value in my child being with a peer group that he feels confident with, that he can develop those relationships with and do those things with them versus sitting one-on-one by himself all day with a resource teacher, because that's what would be happening if he were at his home school right now. And go substitute in any of those classes and don't tell me that the things they're doing with those kids aren't amazing and helpful to them. And they're not segregated. They are probably the most popular kids in the school. I think every single kid at Ben Franklin knows my son. They are part of the community. They are known. But it's a need that we're trying to meet. And I just worry. I think every kid, probably in reality, my son probably could have been included probably through 2nd grade, because the gap in academics is way too vast past then. So I think we owe it to our students to provide that, but I just worry. I've seen both sides of it. There's a need that's being met, and I feel like we're being very short-sighted to say we're going to include everyone, we're going to meet all their needs, we're going to do it at their home schools. They're not going to miss out on anything that they get, because I think they are, and that's my worry. And I just would like us to pause for just a second before we pull all of the resources out, because I think it's going to cause problems for a lot of families. And I don't think, unfortunately, when you have a preschooler, you don't know any better. You're trusting the district. I guarantee the IEP teams are probably meeting with parents, and they're like, they're going to be great. They're going to go to kindergarten. It's going to be awesome. You don't know any better, because you're trusting the district. You're trusting that they're making the best decisions for your kid. And then when things fall apart, you're left holding the pieces, try to figure out what to do. And that's what I worry is going to happen. We have no options when that happens, none.
So
I want to address one thing, and I think you were involved in one of these conversations, and I'm interrupting you. I am. Your part regarding the behavioral issues that your son addressed. That was actually a conversation that Paul, you were there, Marcy, Katie, Laurel, and I don't know if you were there or not. But we had this conversation with Julie Cosson regarding those specific behavioral issues, and looking at these behavioral issues not as an issue with the child's behavior, but more of a what is the child trying to communicate with that behavior, and then how to address that. As to what is going to be missed, that's the whole point of all this, is that inclusion cannot work if things are missed. It just can't. It can't, because if you start missing things, then you're right. We shouldn't be doing it. Because it can't be successful if you're not providing the kids the resources, supports, modifications, accommodations to be successful. And, to the last one, just Laurel said the last meeting, we're not eliminating it as an option if necessary. Did you not say that?
She told me we were eliminating.
She said that we weren't going to plan on having it. But you also said that if an IEP team comes out with this is best for this child, then we would do that. But I also want to point out that, would you talk about, an individual child and say, hey, my kid may have been better at this in this environment with these other kids. You can't talk about those other kids in the same context of your child, because you can't assume that what is best for one individual kid and what one family says, hey, I want my kid, Johnny, Jenny, whomever, in this environment. Great, that's wonderful. But if you have other families that say, we want my kid place in a homeschool, and then you start saying no to those other families because of what has been set up for one individual family, that's when you start having due process issues. That's when you start having least restrictive environment issues.
But we already said that we moved kids, right? Didn't we move some of the kids? We moved some of the kids back into their home schools that came out of the preschool, so we're not doing that.
And that's my point. You can't. I mean,
Right now, though, you're shutting down an option for somebody that could be part of due process.
No, I'm just saying you can't. They're not
saying-
mutually exclusive. You can't look at when you look at one individual kid in an IEP setting. You can't take into consideration what's going on with kids outside of that IEP, because those kids and the services that are being provided to the child at issue during the IEP meeting, those aren't the same. And if it ended up that you had kids as a result of an IEP were being placed in a similar environment, that's one thing. But then if you have kids as a result of an IEP are getting placed in different environments, that you can't control the result of multiple IEPs. That's why we keep going back to, we're looking at individual kids. And the point is, inclusion is about including kids. And in doing so, with supports, with accommodations, with modifications. I understand that it's hard, and I understand that it's scary. But I think that it's also incumbent on the district, and I'll take it. If I hear it, I'll bring it up too. And I think I have. If we as a district are having issues in providing a resource that kids need, and a family feels that those resources aren't being provided and their kid isn't being properly prepared and properly supported in a classroom, we owe it to that family. We owe it to that kid to see what more we can do. This isn't just a, hey, it's April 8th and we've had your IEP and this is what we're going to do and we'll see you next year. This is a process that's got to continue.
Well, Jay, that's all great. That's all great in theory, though. But when you have a family in the middle of it and things go bad and you don't have a lot of options, that's where you're going to end up in due process. That's where you're going to outplace kids. So
but we have to make sure that
families aren't going to
those...
wait for us to take some time or a year to figure out
I'm
what
not saying
we're
a
doing.
year. I'm saying a phone call and say, what can we do? What can we change right now?
So
I think we should
can
just
keep going back around
right,
and around
we'll just,
and around because we're an hour and 30, 40 minutes into this. I'm not sure if we're getting any further along.
No.
Would you?
One more question
No,
I want to
I guess
ask
we're
is
just
this.
going to have to bring
some of
it
these
back
placements
to see
already
if
been decided in IEP meetings for next year? And that conversation can't be had at the board table regarding the results of those kids' IEP meetings.
And I'm not trying.
saying.
I'm not trying to have that. I mean, I guess we need to determine if there's any other questions we want the administration to bring back and determine if we want to. Like I said, I don't think the best way to go about this is for the board to create an action item and direct the administration to do something. I feel like our concerns should be taken into account and we get feedback on it, but if that's our only alternative, I guess I'm willing to entertain it, but I don't really think that's the best way to go about it, if I'm being honest. But maybe Laurel needs time to hear some of these thoughts, and
the
come
point is,
back
even if we
with
had
her
an
thoughts.
action item, it wouldn't necessarily be any action that could be implemented, because the only implementation can be done through an IEP. So even if we were to say, hey, we are going to create this room, whether or not this room is filled is determined by the individual IEP meeting.
I'm just saying, are we going to have it as an option? I feel like we're eliminating the option.
I think
Right.
we've kind of come all the way around on
I
this.
just have a question that I don't know if we could maybe then just kind of maybe put in an email to the board, but I imagine there are other, this is very scary to me. I mean, I don't have kids either in this, but just kind of thinking through just being, your average kid parent and having, kind of having these uncertainties and just generally, like, just having your average kid trying to, go through the system and wanting the best for them and trying to figure out, what is available here for them. I mean, that's scary enough, and I just can't imagine, on top of everything else, families having to go through it. So it is scary coming from that respect. And I guess the way I would want it approached would be as conservatively as possible to, you know, so it's as painless as possible. And I would imagine there are other districts that are kind of going that same direction or have gone there already, where they have eliminated, you know, that option of a self-contained classroom or things like that. I don't know if there's research out there, reports out there, or, you know, some district out there that can help with kind of the anxiety that's kind of happening up here. So, you know,
And
So if
that
the
would be
board
very
would
helpful.
send me questions that you have, we will be back on the 22nd.
And
Laurel
I
can
just
answer
want
this
to,
question, Paul.
Say it again?
I think Linda can get an answer. Laurel was nodding like she.
For research and for
No.
all the other districts, how about we
Look,
just hold, we're
I think
an
we could
hour and
bring
30,
that back.
40 minutes into this.
Okay.
Let's,
That's fine.
yeah, I just want to be clear coming into the last meeting on the 22nd that, you know, some notes, just a couple of observations. Number one, if you haven't gone and read the minutes from the Special Occasions Strategic Plan Committee, they're all there. I go in, I download them, I read them in order for me to have a sense of, since I'm not there, when Jason is giving his board report, you have the structure of the minutes. So I would encourage everybody to go. They're public. So I would have you go. And when you read these, you see the struggle. You see people disagreeing. You read the back and forth around what needs to be done, concerns about this. We need a broader view. I mean, there's history here for 2 years now that I think is really helpful. So I want to encourage people to go back and look at this. It's all there. On the 18th, Stephanie, you shared the concern that I think you've articulated tonight as your ask, I would say. I think it's more of an ask and less of a discussion. And my note to myself was, you're concerned and not convinced that the work being done through inclusionary practices are not satisfying your concerns. For me, as an individual board member, they've been heard, they've been discussed, some have raised their voices around it. We're listening to a trusted team member in terms of Laurel's work with this and her teams. And the challenge for the board is to trust that you have heard this. You use the term anxiety, Linda. I think that's probably a good word. And that moving forward, all this gets added to the conversation and the decision making. And for individual parents, we have a parent in the room who spoke 2 weeks ago about this, right? And it's imperfect. To Jason's point, it's always going to be, even with kids who were regular ed, you had imperfect years and times. The bottom of this, the bottom line of this is that we're moving forward with practices that at least I'm hearing and have been reading for 2 years now in the minutes, hearing Jason's support in his report, that things get poked and prodded and challenged. And so if there are parents, to those who are watching this and those in the room, who feel like they're not heard or feel like they're getting an incomplete answer, there has to be some safety and trust to come back to Laurel View. And if we have teachers that feel like they're not ready, they're not prepared enough, right? Then we need to hear that from a PD standpoint, and there needs to be the resources put behind that, which I heard you talk about tonight. And if there are principals who feel like they're not at the same level or in the same loop, all those pieces, it's to me, this is about over communication at this point and really aligning all the resources that I hear you talking tonight about, Laurel. And in the end, it's being heard, hopefully, and also being trusted. And I know that's a word that carries a lot of baggage, but I think we are here where we are now with a lot of progress forward, and the interest is to continue to improve that. So for all those stakeholder groups, board's been heard tonight, and there has to be a level of honesty and trust that clearly, moving forward, has to change if it hasn't changed. So that is a piece of this as well.
Okay. So board members, send me your questions. We'll forward them. I'll make sure Katie, Laurel have those, and anybody else, and we'll get those back to you.
And then I guess we'll have to decide if we're gonna make an action item or.
Yeah, I will
What we'll do.
say at this point, I don't see this as an action item, I really see this as a deep discussion, interest being presented, and the administration and the leaders of the programs hearing it.
And I'll make very clear, nor do I. It is certainly not an action item.
I don't even know if this would be something that would be proper for the board to address as an action
way
item from a legal perspective, and before even thought was doing so.
Oh my God.
It'd probably be proper to consult district council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
I think
all
we're
right.
throwing out as idle threats.
Consent agenda. Are there any items board members would like to be removed from the consent agenda to be considered separately? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the personnel report, employment recommendations, resignations and retirements, termination, appointment of position, principal of Lincoln Elementary, Abraham Lincoln Elementary, finance facility and operations, school district payment order, March 12th, 2019 to April 1st, 2019, the FOIA report, March 12th, 2019 through April 1st, 2019, board meeting minutes, open and closed session minutes for March 7th, 2019 through March 9th, 2019, open and closed session minutes from March 12th, 2019 through March 14th, 2019, and open and closed session minutes for March 18th, 2019 and March 19th, 2019.
Motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Oh, let's just do a quick discussion on that one, just because.
Oh, I
just
can't
one
even though
person.
it's consent agenda? I'm allowed to.
Just
okay,
just
discussion.
real quick before you jump into that, I just want to mention Sarah Rodriguez is on this report as I'm recommending her to be the next principal of Abraham Lincoln. Two outstanding candidates, Chuck Brewster and Sarah Rodriguez. It was a really tough decision. Had a lot of great feedback. Had to make a ultimate recommendation for the board, but really proud to be recommending Sarah Rodriguez and her many years in the classroom, her many years at the primary level, and then also at the intermediate level as well as being a coach and AEC teacher. Just has a really nice background in the last 3 years as assistant principal. So I apologize for jumping over
No,
the
go
consent
ahead.
agenda a little bit on that one.
No, and I was just gonna add, I'm gonna vote present. I didn't wanna pull the personnel report separately, so I'm not, just cause the long-term sub's in there, so this isn't, I don't wanna hear that, I don't approve of Sarah Rodriguez or anything else. It's simply because the long-term sub is in my wife's classroom, so I'm gonna vote present.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mrs. D'Ambrosio?
Yes.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Mr. Buckles?
Present.
Mr. Lovak?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes again? I thought you called on me.
Mrs. Nelson.
I thought,
Sorry.
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson and Mrs. Clark.
Yes, motion carries. All right, superintendent's recommendation. The last day of the 2018-19 school year, may I have a motion to approve the last student attendance day for the 2018-2019 school year as presented.
Motion.
second.
And that day is June 6th, pending any further emergency days.
Kent and his buddies are highly upset. They wanted you to move the date up. I think they were
They
gonna
wanted
lobby
more
you.
days?
They wanted to move the date up towards us
Oh, they
here.
wanted to move?
Yeah, move it this
Reduce
way.
more
Yeah,
days.
yep.
Just to be clear on that, if we do have more emergency days, we'd have to add them,
We
but
would have to add.
graduation will
Will
still
remain
remain on
June
June
7th.
So if we get 2 feet of
7th.
snow,
Yes.
Wait, is that Friday? It's on Friday?
Yeah.
Minnesota's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never
June
know
7th.
what they're gonna
Okay,
come
June
for.
7th, yeah.
June,
Okay,
oh, but
Last
June
day.
6th is the.
June 6th is the last day. That's
The
what you're
SIP
taking
day.
action on.
Right,
You're
right.
taking action on June 6th.
sorry.
No, you're
Okay.
good. You're good.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Lovak?
Yes.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
Yes.
Mrs. D'Ambrosio?
Yes.
Mr. Buckles?
yes.
Mrs. Clark?
Yes, motion carries. Network and wireless refresh. May I have a motion to approve the purchase of network switch equipment and wireless networking hardware at the prices presented.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion.
Mike had brought this forward a few meetings ago. We've had a couple conversations on this. Board at that time was very comfortable with the recommendation.
Any questions? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Mr. Buckles?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mrs. D'Ambrosio?
Yes.
Mr. Lovak?
Yes.
Mrs. Clark?
Yes, motion carries. The approval of professional services contract with Health Pro Pediatrics LLC. May I have a motion to approve the professional services contract with Health Pro Pediatrics LLC?
Motion. Second.
Discussion.
So these have come before you a couple other times. These are some really hard to hire positions that Marcy and her team and HR department have reached out and done the general search for an individual, but we weren't able to secure one. So she went down the contract route and was able to secure somebody. So we're really excited about that as we look into next year. Yes, thank you.
Okay. No questions?
Just quickly, so this is from August 22nd to November 19th, but the school psychologist is still in there now. Right.
We're just getting ahead of it.
You just were ahead of it based on the last time, yeah. Got it, no, smart to do, yeah.
We want to make sure that we
Yep.
have the contract.
Right. In
And
place,
HR
yeah.
getting
Yep.
stuff done.
There you go.
All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Lovak?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Buckles?
Yes.
Mrs. D'Ambrosio?
Yes.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Mrs. Clark?
Yes, motion carries. And last, resolution authorizing the abatement of a portion of the 2018 taxes levied. May I have a motion to approve the resolution calling for an abatement of a portion of the debt service levy contained within the 2018 tax levy?
Motion.
Second.
Discussion.
So this is exactly like last year. This year it's $63,831 that we'd be abating back, or abating through the process. But it is exactly the same as last year.
Just for clarification, for those listening, this is similar to last year's levy. We, as Eric DePorter recommended, for new growth, we were above the estimate when the actual numbers came in, which is the $63,831. Abating this back as is being presented means that the district loses those dollars moving forward, correct, Eric? So similar to last year, so this is
No, we just lose it for this year.
Just for this year.
63,000.
That's why
Just
you're
for
abating.
this year.
We lose it for this year's
Yeah.
levy.
Right, but you said moving
I'm
forward. I
sorry.
didn't know.
Well,
It's
and-
just
for clarification.
And I want to acknowledge also that the date to formally, to say that we weren't going to, we had to say what we're going to do with the county, correct?
Yeah, so 2 questions there. Yes, we're
Yes.
just debating one time. This is a one-time
The
give back to
63,000, right.
put us in line with what the December vote was on the levy. So a quarter of
Which
the
was
available
0.
CPI and 100% of new property growth. So that's what this abatement accomplishes. The reason why it's coming in this format and as an action item tonight is because we get this report on I got it on March 18th.
Right.
I have a week to give it back.
Right, no,
The
I
clerk
understand.
doesn't
Yeah.
wait, yeah.
Right, no, I understand. I just
Yeah.
want to say,
That's why it's
Right, no,
coming
no,
in the
and-
same
and-
fashion as it did last year. I've already sent this direction to the clerk because we didn't have an option to wait.
correct.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. D'Ambrosio?
Yes.
Mr. Lovak?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
No.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Buckles?
Yes.
Mrs. Clark?
Yes, motion carries. All right, items for consideration for future agenda. Oh, wait, yes. Are there any items board members wish to present for a future agenda? Then other, do we have anything under other?
I have 2.
Okay.
I sit up here and I might get upset and I might raise my voice and I might use foul language. I apologize. I shouldn't do that. That being said, there's a lot of people, not including myself, on that special education strategic planning committee that put in a ton of work and a ton of time and do a ton of great work. And if anybody isn't communicating that work out properly, that's on me. It's not on that committee. It's on me. And I don't want criticisms regarding my communication to reflect in any way on anyone on that committee, because they do really good work. And 2, Kurt, don't ever fucking use my son as a pawn again. Because my son His name is Parker Jason Loba.
Jason,
No,
Jason.
no, no, no,
No.
no, no, no,
No,
no,
no,
no.
hey, Jason.
Don't use
No.
my son as a pawn, because
Let
he's
him
not.
finish, and then you can tell him.
He's not a pawn. He's not someone to bring into a conversation because he happens to have Down syndrome.
Didn't-
He's not someone to bring into a conversation because he happens to receive special education services.
Didn't-
He's not someone to bring into a conversation because he happens to receive related
Jason,
services
Jason,
from this district.
Jason.
No, I don't want my son brought into a conversation as a pawn, because he's not. He's
Okay,
not.
Jason, you can, Jason.
That's what drives your decision, Jason.
Jason.
That's my opinion.
That's
Jason.
fine, but don't
That's-
bring my
that's-
son up
that's-
as a pawn.
Okay, let's.
He's not, he
All
wasn't.
right. Any other?
I have
So,
one
you know
other-
what?
other-
I had to bring it up.
Stop, you know what,
Uh,
Jason,
Eric-
stop using language
No,
like
you know what?
that.
It's my
You know
son.
what?
You brought it up.
No,
and
you
I'm
know
going
what?
to
Get off
protect
your
my
horse
son.
with that.
Okay.
No, no,
There's
no,
no
I'll never
protection
get
to
off my
your son.
son's horse.
You know what? There's no protection.
Kurt
Get off of
and
that.
Jason, listen.
Give me a
enough.
break.
It's an emotional subject. Jason, I get it. You have to realize.
I do.
2 seconds before Kurt said that, Erica basically was insinuating something about my kids. So, you know what? I don't think anybody meant
Neither,
anything.
no kid should be used as pawns.
I
It shouldn't- it doesn't matter if
understand.
it's my kid
I
or your kid or
understand.
anyone's
I don't think
kid.
anybody was trying to do that.
I know, but we
think-
can't do it.
Jason,
We have to think
Jason,
about kids as a whole.
I understand.
And
Okay.
what all kids are
Jason,
receiving. And to
we also
call
need
out
to
an
keep-
individual kid
Jason.
is wrong.
Jason, we also need to, let's try to.
You're right, but
keep
we
our
need, and I
composure.
apologize for it
Keep
again.
our
I just apologize
composure.
for it. It was wrong.
You
I
had
think you're right.
time to
I
think
shouldn't
about it.
have.
You had time to think about it, like, the language isn't necessary.
It's not.
like it was
Don't
emotional
call out
in
my
the
kid.
moment. Just, it's.
How
Didn't
about-
call him out,
Erica,
Jason.
do you have any
I
other?
I have a,
others?
I have a
So-
quick other, I just want to just correct a comment from earlier about the referendum. The referendum for the work being done in Hadley and all the other schools was in fact passed as a positive plus vote. And I just want to clarify that, that it was passed, I think the language used that it was stolen, a referendum was stolen, which I wanted to clarify that, in fact, it was passed by, I want to say 10 votes, but I know that it was, yeah, 10. So just clarification for the record. Referendum did pass 10 votes by election. Thank you.
Okay, all right, upcoming meetings, Monday, April 22nd, 2019, regular board meeting at 7 o'clock at the CSO. Thursday, April 25th, a special board meeting at 7 o'clock at the CSO. May I have a motion to adjourn the April 8th, 2019 meeting?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.